Free Speech TV is supported by your contributions, and I strongly encourage you during the pledge drives, or even not during the pledge drives, to call Free Speech TV at 877-378-8669 and make a contribution, support Free Speech TV. But that said, our program, the Thom Hartmann Program, what you're watching right now, is sustained by commercial advertising, and we're on commercial stations around the country. We run ads, they pay us for that. And one of the ways that you can support our program is by going to thomhartmann.com, our website, and clicking on the advertisements on that page for our sponsors and buying their products, supporting their products, or letting them know that you care about their products and that you support our show. That's thomhartmann.com, and click on the advertising there to support our program. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your supporting Free Speech TV by your ongoing, calling and supporting the fundraising drives, and we also would really appreciate if you go to thomhartmann.com. Our book today is How to Be Less Stupid About Race by Crystal M. Fleming. This is from page 28, in the chapter, The Idiot's Guide to Critical Race Theory. As stated previously, we live in a society where the phrase white supremacy has been traditionally used to refer to neo-Nazis and extremists, rather than the dominance of people socially defined as white. But legal scholars, social scientists, and political philosophers working in the robust field of critical race theory have developed conceptual tools for recognizing and responding to systemic racism and white supremacy. Critical race theory is an interdisciplinary body of scholarship that emerged in the aftermath of the civil rights movement as legal theorists grappled with naming and challenging the persistence of racism after the fall of de jure segregation at law. Born in the mid-1970s, CRT, critical race theory, boldly embraced an overtly activist agenda, the promotion of racial justice and the eradication of racial oppression. Bridging legal analysis with storytelling and narratives centering the experiences of people of color, critical race theorists set out to unveil and address the persistence of racism and white dominance. And importantly, scholars in this tradition also acknowledge the intersections of racism with sexism, class oppression, and other systems of inequality. One of the most important and helpful features of critical race theory is the clear analysis of white supremacy in the so-called post-civil rights era, a period in U.S. history when politicians and the majority population increasingly portrayed themselves as beyond race or non-racist. Critical race theory is kryptonite for the myth of colorblindness and helps cut through the BS of post-racial propaganda by specifying the role of social institutions, especially laws and legal practices, in reproducing racism. From a critical race perspective, the United States is not and never was a benevolent nation of immigrants. Rather, it is a nation of settler colonialism, genocide, white nationalism, racial slavery, legal torture, and institutionalized rape. Since the inception of this country, laws and legal practices systematically favored whites economically, politically, and socially. In fact, critical race scholar Cheryl Harris in 1993 described whiteness as a form of protected property within the U.S. racial hierarchy, a category of privilege tied to the accumulation of economic resources and the subjugation of racialized others. From this perspective, laws and legal institutions within this country have continually converted white identity into a valuable, exclusive mechanism for maintaining power. Few people realize that the nation's first immigration law, the Naturalization Act of 1790, was explicitly white supremacist, restricting naturalization to free white persons, though white women were let out of this exclusionary understanding of freedom. Granting citizenship to free white men was quite literally a government handout for whites only. As you might have noticed, history keeps coming up here, quite simply because critical race theorists encourage historical consciousness. In order to understand present-day racial realities, we have to look to the past. That might seem obvious on its face, but the sad truth is that most U.S. citizens have never seriously studied history of any kind, much less racial history. Yet the vast majority of the population is ignorant of our racist past. How can they understand the impact of that past on the present? Critical race theorists also challenge the liberal logics that have been used to portray the United States as beyond race, for example, by analyzing the jurisprudence surrounding the country's alternative action policies. Scholars such as Richard Delgado, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Derek Bell, the last of whom was a professor at Barack Obama's Harvard Law School, have shown that legal assumptions about meritocracy and fairness that are used by conservatives to undermine affirmative action programs are logically inconsistent with the existence of institutionalized racism. Other scholars have taken a critical or systemic approach to the study of racism, who have shown that the nation's first affirmative action programs and government handouts were conceived by white Americans for white Americans. From using racially justified mass murder, land theft, and labor exploitation to enacting racist citizenship laws, people socially defined as white have built generations of wealth and political power by playing the race card and founding an entire nation on white identity politics. To take just one example, the 1862 Homestead Act gleefully gave away millions of acres of stolen land almost exclusively to whites. And quiet as it's kept, white people continue to be the #1 beneficiaries of affirmative action today. Race scholars are aware that white women are the top recipients of affirmative action, but few have considered that white women's primary access to affirmative action helps maintain the racial wealth gap. Because these white women typically marry white men, their affirmative action benefits are channeled toward their white families. And their access to affirmative action benefits, preferential hiring, and federal diversity initiatives not only helps them, but also bolsters the socioeconomic status of white families broadly. My first serious encounter with critical race theory occurred after I'd finished my PhD. Although I didn't realize it then, I had chosen to undertake my graduate work in a sociology department. How to Be Less Stupid About Race by Crystal Fleming.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. A couple days ago, it was over the weekend, actually. Today's Wednesday. I think it was Saturday or Sunday. Louise and I were talking about Donald Trump, and I said, it reminds me of something from when I was a kid, but, some movie that I saw, and Louise was like, The Music Man, and I was like, oh yeah, The Music Man. It was like 62, right? I mean, I was literally 11 years old, or 10 years old, and maybe 63, whatever year. Anyhow, what was it, Robert Preston and Julie... No, I don't remember the stars. I'm sorry. I'm lousy at that. But so we pulled it up. We found it on Amazon. I thought it'd be on Netflix. It wasn't. And we watched the first half of it. I know the second half, he turns out to be a lovable con man, but he's a con man, and he's proud to be a con man. And yesterday, what the New York Times pointed out to all of us is that so's Donald Trump. Now, how does he pull this off? I think Adam Smith, in his book Theory of Moral Sentiments, this is 1759. This is a book that was read by the founders and the framers, and there was actually had a big influence on the United States. Thomas Paine was a huge fan of Adam Smith. And in the Theory of Moral Sentiments, Adam Smith said, and I quote, "This disposition to admire and almost to worship the rich and powerful, and to despise or at least neglect persons of poor and mean conditions, is the great and most universal cause of the corruption of our moral sentiments." I'm going to get back to that in a little bit. But, just what the New York Times has laid out, in fact, I really want to get into it in some depth at the top of the next hour, but basically what the New York Times has laid out is that Donald Trump is a con man. I mean, he was making $200,000 a year when he was 2 years old through a phony company with a phony job, literally being paid $200,000 a year. By the time he was 8 years old, his net worth was over $1 million. He was a millionaire at the age of 8. He has never wanted for anything in his life. He has no understanding of what it means to be hungry or to be financially insecure. Literally no understanding. And his the almost $500 million that he hustled from his dad, including trying to get his dad to change his will and sticking you and me with a $500 million tax bill that he evaded, which New York State says they're now checking out. It's a pretty big deal. But there's something else that I really want to talk to you about today, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And that has to do with conservative white women. What's going on with conservative white women? If you are one or know one, listen to this and let me know what you think. There's a number of scientific studies now suggesting that conservative white women see the world differently from conservative white men. Well, with regard to the role of women, I guess in the same way as conservative white men, but very differently from men and women of pretty much any other, political perspective. Right now, you've got 70% of Republican women who think Judge Kavanaugh, Bart Kavanaugh, should be on the bench. Only 15% of Republican women oppose him. That's amazing, right? Republican women are nearly as good at denying and minimizing sexism as Republican men, obviously. But why? Why is this? There's a fascinating piece in the Huffington Post that has the title, Has Backing Kavanaugh Really Lost the GOP the Women's Vote? And I'm sorry, I don't have the author here. When you do a print function on Huffington Post using Simplify Page, it loses the author's name for some reason. But anyway, the title of it is, Has Backing Kavanaugh Really Lost the Republican Party the Women's Vote? And basically, the answer is no. Or at least not the Republican women's vote. And they point out that conservative white women tend to believe that gender is completely binary, that you're either male or female, number one, that men are inherently aggressive, that men are inherently selfish, and that men are inherently inclined to rapey behavior, shall we say. And that the basis of this is an idea that was first, laid out, articulated really clearly in the 1800s in Victorian England. And you even find reference to it in Dickens' work, that men and women belong in what were referred to in the Victorian era as separate spheres. That the man's sphere was the public sphere. It was out there doing things, making things happen, controlling things. Being a politician, having an income, being a lawyer, being a doctor, out there, right? The external sphere. Whereas the women's role is in the interior sphere, which is the family, the domestic sphere. In fact, these two spheres were in the 1800s specifically referenced as public and domestic. In fact, here's a quote from that era. Men possess the capacity for reason, action, aggression, independence, and self-interest, while women inhabited a separate private sphere, one suitable for the so-called inherent qualities of femininity, emotion, passivity, submission, dependence, and selflessness, all derived, it was insistently claimed, from women's sexual and reproductive organization. And this is why when Donald Trump goes to a rally and talks about Christine Blasey Ford in what could only be characterized as derogatory terms for a woman who says that she's the victim of a sexual assault, this is why the women behind Donald Trump and in that rally were applauding. This is the reason why, because of this worldview, this notion that this is how things are. Here's this clip.
36 years ago, this happened. I had one beer, right? I had one beer.
He's quoting Christine Ford.
Well, do you think it was, nope, it was one beer. Oh, good. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember.
Right. Actually, we do know it was upstairs. She testified to that at some length. But, he can get away with it. And literally, those of you listening on the radio didn't see the picture of the women behind him, but women behind him were applauding and holding up signs that said "Women for Trump." So this is why, the former federal prosecutor, Simon Powell, was on Fox News yesterday, and he said that, or sometime in the last week, and he said that Blasey was, quote, far from being raped. It was all a fumbled attempt to make out at a party. And, of course, you've got, other Republican women. In this case, Laura, hang on just a second. Here we go. Laura Ingraham saying that she was hysterical. Christine Blasey Ford, hysterical. So what do we do with this? I mean, if there is if Republicans are about 30% of the American population and or conservatives, let's say, and conservative women, which would be 15% of the population, hold this belief, and maybe a lot of independent women do, although it appears that Trump is losing independent women. How do you speak to them? How do you talk to them about this? I mean, this is obviously not the only issue. For example, Lindsey Graham said, I have argued to you that when you found that a judge was a perjurer, you couldn't in good conscience send him back into a courtroom because everybody that came in that courtroom thereafter would have a real serious doubt. Now, that was back when he was talking about Bill Clinton. Right. He was the impeachment trial manager for the impeachment of Bill Clinton in the Senate. So, here we go, right? But what do you do with this? Is it possible even? Or is it that some conservative women are really wed to this idea, no pun intended, of, well, I just want to be the wife of my husband who will make my life comfortable and happy, and all I have to do is go to the tennis court, 3 days a week and work out with my trainer. I mean, what's going on here?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I said that because a lot of these white women who voted for Trump were upper middle class and upper class white women. We'll be back. And welcome back. Let's see here. Jared in Downington, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jared, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Tom. First, last week's testimony by Dr. Ford was incredible. I don't know if I've told you this before, but as a young child, I was told in graphic detail about somebody who was raped, gang raped, with a plunger in front of me, and it's probably scarred me probably for the rest of my life. It's something I take very seriously. And but I want to get into Brett Kavanaugh a bit. If he gets on the court, and he is an illegitimate Supreme Court justice,
as is Gorsuch in my mind.
Okay, and as well. Now that I think about it, let's see, Trump, and then you also have Bush as well, who I consider illegitimate.
Yep.
So basically the entire Supreme
Roberts.
Court, exactly, pretty much the entire Supreme Court making these rulings would be illegitimate.
Well, at least all the right-wingers.
All the right-wingers.
You could argue that Clarence Thomas was appointed by George Herbert Walker Bush, and I would argue that he would not have been president if he had not been Reagan's vice president, and Reagan would not have been president if he hadn't committed treason by cutting a deal with the Ayatollahs to hold the hostages to trash Jimmy Carter. So therefore, you could argue that George Herbert Walker Bush was illegitimate, but he did actually win the majority vote, I believe he had the majority vote. He certainly won the Electoral College, with his Willie Horton ads, his racializing the election.
Oh yeah, George H.W. Bush. Oh, he used to win. He won the election by a large margin.
Yeah, as I recall.
Correctly.
Yeah.
That was back when there was 90% white nation though. But What I was going to say was that if
I don't think the racial makeup of the country has changed that much in the last 30 years, Jared, or at least the electoral age racial makeup of the country. It might have shifted by 3 or 4%, but anyway.
Bizarre. But what I was going to say was that if the Supreme Court was illegitimate, should we just take take Andrew Jackson's playbook and just basically say that Chief Justice John Roberts made his ruling and let him enforce it?
Right.
Because at this point, I just don't see why we need to, enforce these rulings.
Well, the problem is, Jared, that we don't enforce them. The enforcement of the law is the responsibility of the executive branch. So the decision is the president's.
Okay, so why don't we get a Democrat in there and tell him point blank, like, you don't need to enforce any of these rulings. So you don't need to enforce Citizens United. You don't need to enforce whatever rulings they have about abortion or, the gutting unions or anything like that.
Yeah.
And what would they say during the debate?
That's going to be really, really tough. I mean, both Jackson and Lincoln defied the Supreme Court. Lincoln defied the Dred Scott decision and, explicitly defied it. But I don't think that there's been a president since then who has. I doubt it's going to happen. But your take is, well formed. Jared, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It looks like all of my callers right now are men. I was hoping to hear from some women, but anyhow, Edward, and not to diss men. Oh, there's one coming in. Edward in Sierra Madre, California. Hey, Edward, your thoughts on all this?
Hey, Tom, how are you today?
I'm great, but I'll get better. How about you?
There you go. Tom, my mom's a conservative Republican woman, and she probably defies all the basic stereotypes. I mean, she was poor when she was young. She worked hard. Her and my father built something together. And what Scott her and my two sisters, who are younger than, who are, my age, is the single issue voters and Fox News pumping the abortion issue because, we're Catholic.
But isn't a woman's right to control her own reproductive system, or should she surrender her agency, her power to a government agency that's basically run by men and laws made by men to control women? Isn't that really a subset of this whole conservative women's idea that let the men take care of everything? I mean, I think I saw this with my mother. My mother was a brilliant woman. I mean, she graduated from MSU Sigma Cum Laude, and she was just very, very smart. But, or I shouldn't even say but, because I'm not sure it has to do with being smart. She was a product of her times. I mean, she was born in, I think, 1929, and came of age during the Great Depression and World War II, and when she married my dad, she was a pilot. She was flying airplanes. She obviously drove cars. She made her, she worked her way through MSU as a lifeguard in the summers up in Charlevoix, where she was born and grew up. And but after I was born, or maybe after my brother Steve, 2 years after me, was born, she stopped driving. She gave up her driver's license. She basically, didn't leave the house that much after that, and became, a housewife, just a full-time, she raised 4 boys, which was a lot. I look back and just, wow. But, her thing was, Carl's going to take care of us all, my dad. And that kind of worldview might incline itself. I mean, I've never had this conversation with my mom, and she's been dead for a while now. But that kind of experience in life might incline one toward a worldview of, well, yeah, men are, kind of nasty, so you have to tolerate that. But on the other hand, the women shouldn't be speaking up, whatnot. Am I making sense, Edward?
I think it's they've replaced the man in their life with the religion in their life. And I'm a Catholic. I go to church, but I agree with you. I mean, it's a decision that a woman should make for herself, and it's a decision she has to make, based on her personal beliefs.
But you're saying basically the bottom line of what you're saying, Edward, is that for many of these women it comes down to the abortion issue. I get that. Thank you for the call, and I think you may well be right, but I think this goes way beyond that. I think that is a reflection of this. Kathy in Edina, Minnesota. Kathy, thanks for listening. What's up?
Hi, it's Edina.
Edina, thank you.
That's fine. I do think that many upper-class women benefit from maintaining the patriarchy, and that are totally willing to go along with it to maintain their lifestyle. I don't think they think about it that way necessarily,
right.
But I think that is a part of what's going on. But I also think that is rapidly changing with the younger people.
Yeah, well, in part it's rapidly changing because you can't maintain a family with one income any longer.
Exactly, unless you are in that zone where your husband makes, many
six figures,
of thousands a year, yeah. And then the other part is that there's the overwhelming number of people that support Trump. Their main goal is to see Roe v. Wade overturned. They aren't even aware of the economic risk factors that are involved in continuing to support Republicans.
Because they have not encountered those risks in their lives. Is that what you're suggesting?
Either that or I work with people like this. They're just not paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
They're so busy working and picking up extra shifts and just keeping their head above water. They're just not as aware of it. They know he's vulgar. They know he's corrupt. But until the economy really has a big fall, they're not going to grasp it fully.
Yeah, well, I think that's true regardless of gender. But to the issue of women, like the story I told about my mom, I mean, that's an ideal that is rapidly vanishing from the American scene. My dad worked in a tool and die shop. Today, I think a man working in a tool and die shop would have a much more difficult time supporting a family, particularly if they were hired in the last 15 years.
Right. And I don't think, I think some people don't realize that the overwhelming number of people support a woman's right to choose. And even if it's overturned, enforcement is going to be really difficult.
If Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Yes.
Enforcement of what?
Enforcement of, of abortion being illegal. It's
punitive
really
laws.
hard.
Yeah, well, in El Salvador right now, if a woman has a miscarriage and anybody, an angry husband, a nosy neighbor, whatever, suggests that they think she had an abortion, she goes straight to prison. I mean, they've got, many, many women down in El Salvador who are serving 20-year prison terms for having miscarriages. So, Kathy, thank you for the call.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So what's going on with all this? And by the way, on the other side of this break, we're going to check in with Greg Pallas live from Georgia. He's got some shocking news for you. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Carbon Shock, A Tale of Risk and Calculus on the Front Lines of a Disrupted Global Economy by Mark Shapiro. This is from the introduction. Chaos, uncertainty, unpredictability. Those are the characteristics of the natural world under the pressures being wrought by climate change. Normal patterns of rainfall, temperature, and extreme weather are changing so rapidly that past baselines for these primordial forces are less and less relevant. Scientists have a word for this state of flux. They call it, quote, the end of stationarity, end quote, a term with a powerful meaning. We can no longer rely on past events to predict future probabilities. The ground is shifting beneath our feet. Now it's becoming increasingly clear that the volatility we're seeing in our natural world is reshaping our financial world too. While we try to hold on to our bearings in the status quo and conduct business as usual, new risks are entering into the equation and new costs are creeping out of the balance sheets of corporations and nations. Just as chaotically as climate change is altering conditions here on Earth, it is changing our understanding of the actual costs of just about everything. In the financial realm, as in the natural realm, the past provides fewer and fewer clues to our future. Like the migration patterns of songbirds that no longer correlate to the hatching patterns of their insect prey, or the mountain snowpacks that no longer store water for the dry summer months. The economy is facing similar miscues born of the interactive loop between tumult in the atmosphere and tumult on the earth. Economic calculations are being upended in ways that are similar to how the digital revolution transformed financial decision-making, though on a far more monumental scale. In early 2014, a report by the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, produced and reviewed by more than 1,000 scientists and approved by 194 governments, identified the economic impact of the enormous changes underway. Slowing the rate of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere would not have devastating impacts on the economy, as is often feared, but would require a fundamental rethinking of our priorities and of our existing business models. Unstated but clearly implied, new forces will rise and others will fall as the true costs of carbon become an increasingly potent economic factor that can no longer be ignored. In 2013, an insurance industry research association called for an entirely new paradigm for assessing risk because rapid-fire changes in weather and temperature are outpacing traditional actuarial calculations. In other words, we are on the threshold of carbon shock. There are 5 greenhouse gases. Together, these gases of related, though different provenance, are in a circuit of relationships that give them the same ultimate impact, trapping heat in the Earth's lower atmosphere, giving rise to the greenhouse effect. Up from the center of the Earth comes a 100-billion-year-old periodic table of decaying organic fossils in the form of carbon dioxide and methane, embedded in oil, coal, and natural gas, thus the terms fossil fuels. From the combustion of these ancient fossils comes O3, also known as ozone, derived from the interaction of sunlight with CO2 and other hydrocarbons, and O2, nitrous oxide, which in addition to being emitted from, from industrial sources, is also contained in fertilizers and released from soil through agricultural tilling, and a synthesized family of hydrofluorocarbons generated as waste products from the production of other chemicals, primarily refrigerants and pesticides. In the gas world, they are all cousins, baton passers of molecular reaction that conspire to create turmoil in the heavens. Carbon dioxide is by far the most abundant, which is why carbon has become a stand-in reference for all greenhouse gases. It's not that carbon hasn't always had a cost. It's just that, until now, carbon's costs have been, for the most part, invisible. We haven't been accounting for them. Just as an optical illusion tricks the eye into seeing something that's not there, traditional accounting diverts our attention from invisible costs. We only see profits. Keeping these costs a mystery has been fundamental to our economic growth. Businesses benefit from a false ledger in which the environmentally corrosive impacts of the energy they use to produce, distribute, and dispose of everything from almonds to automobiles have been dramatically undercounted. 3,000 of the world's biggest companies, according to the United Nations report, could lose a third or more of their value if calculations of profits included the actual environmental costs. Most of these costs are the result of greenhouse gases emitted from the burning of fossil fuels, from which 82% of the world's energy is derived. Unlike smog or smoke or other acute contaminants, you can't necessarily see greenhouse gas pollution, but we are the involuntary recipients of its steadily expanding effects. These effects come to us fractured in scattered reports of distress, polar bears floating off on melting glaciers, hurricanes tearing into distant coastlines, droughts sending farmers into panic, remote island states sinking into the seas. When, in the summer of 2013, a gas chromatograph perched atop the Mauna Loa volcano in Hawaii reported that the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere had, for the first time, reached 400 parts per million, it not only triggered alarm bells from scientists, but signaled costs to come. The world's 2 biggest economies, the United States and the European Union, estimate hundreds of billions of dollars in cost from heat waves, floods, and an accelerating flow of refugees fleeing lands in which they can no longer sustain themselves. Both classify climate change as one of the foremost challenges to political stability. The book Carbon Shock, a tale of risk and calculus on the front lines of a disrupted global economy.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is our old friend Greg Palast, the investigative reporter, author of and producer of it. It started out as a book. It's now a movie that you can see over on Amazon, The Best Money Democracy Can Buy. Greg Palast.
Best democracy money can buy.
Isn't that what I said?
Close enough.
Okay, the best democracy money can buy. I'm sorry. Anyhow, GregPalast.com, of course, the website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast. Greg, welcome back.
Glad to be with you, Tom.
So you are in Georgia right now. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I just avoided a bus yesterday. I'm here announcing with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, and New Georgia Projects and the Rainbow Push that I am suing with these organizations the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp, for removing hundreds of thousands of voters on the grounds that they've moved. They haven't. We got consultants from the post office who assured us that these people have not moved. It's another blackout. And guess what? Not coincidentally, Brian Kemp, the Purgeon General of Georgia, is also running for governor.
Now, he removed 1 in 10 Georgia voters from the rolls. Do I have this right, in 2017?
Yeah, in a single year, 1 in 10 voters of Georgia. And I'm not counting the dead or those in jail. I'm saying 1 in 10 live Georgia voters were removed from the voter rolls. Cockamamie reasons. He is running against Stacey Abrams, who was elected to be the first black female governor in American history. And the polls are looking grim for Brian. It's really neck and neck, but he's in trouble, and I guess he thinks that the only way... I tried to ask him. I tried to meet with him. I said I'd rather not sue him. I'd rather talk to him and get the information from him. But I did tell him, so I went to... he wouldn't talk to me, so I went to talk to him. I went to a barbecue joint, and you could smell the pigs. I didn't know whether they were inside or outside. Kemp's bus showed up. And I tried to talk to the would-be governor, Brian Kemp, about the purges and about avoiding filing a federal lawsuit against him to get the information that's required by the National Voter Registration Act. So, if he doesn't want to be a lawbreaker, I said, just talk to me. And there's a clip we have of his reaction.
Here it is.
This country has gone back 50 years. In terms of racism. And many people don't want to talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it. We have the facts. It's an attack upon those of color, and it's an attack upon poor people. They don't want poor people to be a part of the process. Dr. King said this country is too rich to have any poverty within it. And he also said the government is the enemy. This is a clear example of what the government is doing. It is not friendly to people of color and to poor folks. I'm not afraid to say it. So you can talk the numbers, that's fine. We got the facts. But like Brad said, he's not the activist. He's not SCLC. We fought and died for the right to vote.
Okay, that was the wrong clip, Greg. So you want to tell us what that was?
Let me say who that was. So that was Dr. Charles Steele. He is president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He's the successor to Dr. Martin Luther King in that post. And as he said, we have died, and he's talking about his successors who were gunned down, and for the right to vote in Georgia. And he is my co-plaintiff against Brian Kemp, the, white Secretary of State, or maybe Secretary of State for white people of Georgia. And so he is explaining why he is filing the suit. He explained that to Georgia Press yesterday. And now the next clip is, so I went to Brian Kemp, and with the idea that if he would turn over the information to me willingly, we wouldn't drag his behind into a federal court, and I want to know if this is a racial purge. So I think this next clip is like I say, in the parking lot of a barbecue joint. You can smell the pigs, and here comes Brian Kemp in his campaign bus.
Okay.
Good to see you, man. You doing all right? Good to see you, brother. Good to see you. Good to see you, man. How you doing? Good to see you.
This is Brian Kemp walking around shaking people's hands. For those people listening to the radio as opposed to watching the video.
Good to see you.
Mr. Kemp, are you removing black voters from the voter rolls just so you can win this election?
Please do not touch him.
I'm not touching him. Mr. Kemp, are you removing black voters just to win this election? Please don't touch me or I'll have you arrested. Please don't touch me. Sir, why are you purging voters from the voter rolls? Okay. Sir, why aren't you answering my questions? Sir, why do we have to sue you to get the names of voters who've been removed? Why are you? Let go of me right now, sir. Who are you, sir? Who are you, sir?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this is I welcome to Georgia.
Yeah.
And wow, they wouldn't even let me ask a question. So as you see, and the papers reported on this incident later, saying they knew that I was there, and they had seen me there, so they decided to literally block me, and then they threatened to arrest me. The cops threatened to arrest me that are working with Kemp. Because they said the owner of the property wanted me off, and the owner told the papers, "No, I didn't. I've never kicked anyone off my property." But the main thing is, it's not how they mishandled me; it's how they're mishandling the voters of Georgia. I will say, Tom, that I did get from Kemp a response at the last minute. It's incomplete. We're still going to go to federal court, but he gave me the name of every person and their address that they purged. It's now up at gregpalast.com right now. If you're in Georgia, right now. Go to gregpalast.com, type in your first, last name, and zip code, and find out if you are the 1 in 10 of the negative lottery where you lose your vote in Georgia. It is astonishing.
Wow. Yeah, how many people have confirmed for you that they still live in Georgia? They thought they were still registered to vote, but they've been purged from the rolls. Have you started that audit process, that contacting people process?
Yes, two things. Number one, we sent out the word, and we're already getting flooded with people saying, I was removed. And so I'm actually staying in Georgia to get a few of them on camera. And I just really want people to get this information. Our lawyers are now considering whether we should seek an injunction to extend the registration period, which ends in 1 week on October 9. Mm-hmm. And frankly, that they should just put these names back because we've checked with the post office contractor. This is not inexpensive, by the way, to do this. We checked every single name, and overwhelmingly, almost all those people still are at their voter registration address. They haven't moved anywhere. And of course, the smell of Chris Kobach is not far away.
Right.
They are using the cross-check list as one way to purge voters.
Which raises my last question, Greg. To what extent, it certainly looks like this is a criminal conspiracy, frankly, in Georgia by Brian Kemp. As Secretary of State, he controls the voting rolls to purge, as you point out, 1 out of 10 Georgians off the voting rolls, presumably predominantly in communities of color. And now he's running for governor against Stacey Abrams, who would be the first black woman governor in the history of the United States. But to what extent is this exact same thing happening in other Republican-controlled states? I'm assuming it's not happening in any Democratic-controlled states.
We've sent 90-day notices of federal lawsuits to 26 states. In fact, I'm going to Jesse Jackson's birthday party, my co-plaintiff in Illinois. So we're hitting many states. Kansas, of course, and Ohio, Michigan, Indiana was real bad. In fact, one of the people said, "Oops, it looks like we missed," because they had a court injunction against using cross-check, and their people inside said, "Oops, looks like our people are still using cross-check in violation of an injunction."
We forgot.
All over.
Right. We forgot.
All over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the call for action here right now is for, if you know anybody in Georgia, if you are in Georgia, contact them, or if you just, have, if any Georgians are watching, reading your Facebook feed or whatever, put a link to gregpalast.com and tell these people in Georgia that they can check and see if they're on the purge list. And if so, then you've got 1 week to reinstate your right to vote in the state of Georgia, which has been taken away by the white Republican Secretary of State because he doesn't want the black Democrat Stacey Abrams to be able to win the election.
Young people, too, are really affected. It's kind of like Obama's campaign. It's the young as much as black folk who are backing Abrams. And they are really affected by this purge because they don't distinguish. They pull people out from moving, but they don't distinguish. As Stacey Abrams pointed to me when she saw the list, that they're removing people who moved into Georgia. The new young voters moving into Georgia are being purged. It is, but again,
because they moved into the state. Because they moved into the state.
Into the state. They have literally, and Stacey Abrams discovered this by going through my list. I've asked both candidates to comment. Stacey Abrams, by the way, did not threaten to have me arrested, just so you know. It's only Brian Kemp. And Stacey Abrams looked at the list and said, my God, they're removing people who are moving into the state of Georgia. And she showed me the registration dates mismatched, the second date coming into Georgia. It is astonishing. It is ugly. And Kemp is denying that what he's doing, but he's given us at least a list of the voters. Please check your name.
Yeah, there you go. Go to gregpalast.com for all the information. And if you want the backstory on this, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy is the film to watch. Greg, thanks so much for being with us, as always.
Thank you, Tom.
And for what you're doing. This is great stuff. Greg Palast. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day, and I'm going to start actually picking up your calls right after the break. And welcome back. Let's see here. Ross in Olympia, Washington. Hey, Ross, what's on your mind today?
Hi.
Hey, Ross.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, what's up?
Well, I was wondering if anybody's bothered to check Kavanaugh's calendar to see what he put down on the day he had the bar fight.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that was quite a bit later, wasn't it? That was during his Yale years. We have not seen those calendars. We've only seen the calendars for 1982.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Yeah. But anyway, if he's such a good calendar keeper, maybe somebody ought to take a check.
Yeah, if he's such a good diarist. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great suggestion. Ross, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. Susie in Bellevue, Washington, listening on KBCS. Hey, Susie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I called because I have an idea, but it's only mine for how to deal with this freak in the White House. Let's stop giving him so much credence.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we're giving him too much credence for every stupid move that he makes. And we are moving forward. I'm telling my friends this all the time. They complain and moan and groan about, oh, this, oh, that. I'm like, move forward. The time you're wasting on complaining about stuff is the energy we can use to move forward, because I'm moving forward. I'm going down with a fight. And I don't care, if I lose friends, family, job over this, I'm not stopping. And I think that's what we need to do. So to me, he will always be President Stupid or President Philip, but he is not who he thinks he is.
Yeah, but no, he's clearly a grifter and a comment. Susie, a question. What are your thoughts on this whole situation? I'm lacking the word of conservative white women who are saying, oh yeah, Christine Ford, oh, it was a bad attempt to make out at a party, or
You know what?
Yeah.
I do have a comment on that, and that because I unfortunately am around him. I work in one of the biggest retail stores in my part of the world, so I see this kind of stuff every day. And when those people say things or try to defend it or whatever, I just say, you know what? We're moving forward somewhere down the road. If you guys want to tag along, come with us.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because they're going to be left behind. We're not going to make the decision in this. It's going to be made for us.
So you're not so you're not so concerned with figuring out why conservative women are doing this and working to change their minds.
I don't care. I don't like them. They're gross to me.
Okay.
They say something I don't like, I give it right back to them.
Yeah.
That's it.
So you've moved on.
I can't. Oh God, yes. I'm way forward on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm still struggling to understand how we can communicate with these women. Or if that's even enough. You seem to be saying it's not worth the trouble.
No, I don't think it is worth the trouble anymore. I see it. And it's not that I'm giving up. Like I said, I just firmly believe that's what they want. They want an argument. They want us to say this and that so that they can say this and that. And it's like, no, you know what? Don't even get me going on the whole women issue. I mean, my God, I had an abortion over 30 years ago. You think I don't think about that kid every day? Yeah. I didn't do it because it was fun.
Right.
It was something that happened. So I don't like these women. They're weird to me. They're not real. They're Stepford wives, and I have moved on from 1984.
There you go. Okay, Susie, thanks for enlightening us all. I appreciate the call.
Whatever.
And thank you for listening to KBCS. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Amber in Western Mass listening to WHNP. Hey, Amber, what's up?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So I just wanted to call. I think this whole conversation about conservative women is really interesting and also something I'm very used to. So I am definitely a conservative woman in the blue sea of Western Mass. And I think like a big thing that is the problem with the dialogue in the country is there's just the hate, like just listening to your last caller and listening to all the people that I'm surrounded by out here. It's just this brutal assumption that there's no soul behind a woman having conservative views, that I must be well off, I must be obedient to my husband, and it's just so short-sighted.
So what causes you to believe Brett Kavanaugh over Christine Ford?
I would say that I am beginning to feel skeptical about Brett Kavanaugh, although in the beginning I did not. And the reason behind that is because I think that that sexual assault accusations are flying around like leaves off the trees. And
maybe that's because sexual assault has been flying around like leaves off the trees for 7 millennia.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think that there's a lot behind why they don't want Brett Kavanaugh in the White House, or in the Supreme Court, rather. And, there's all of this sort of gung-ho that he's going to get rid of Roe versus Wade, and he's never actually said that I know of.
Actually, he gave a speech in which he talked about it being one of the worst decisions ever. It was to the Federalist Society a few years back. He's pretty much on record that he thinks that the court wrongly decided this, and he's refused to say on repeated occasions, including during his Senate testimony, that he thought it was correctly decided. What he says is it's established law, which of course is what an appeals court judge would have to look at. But as a member of the Supreme Court, you can say, yeah, it's established law, and we're going to overturn it. I mean, that's routinely done. But I don't want to debate it with you, Amber, and I don't want to get into the minutiae. I'm sorry. In fact, I shouldn't have done that. I'm just curious, what would cause... What is it about, you define yourself as a conservative woman. I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm missing something here.
Okay.
Tell me.
I'd be happy to give you a couple short explanations.
Sure.
Yeah, so for me, and I haven't always been conservative, and I'm not from a wealthy family, and, my husband and I both work just as hard to support the household, and, yes, I do sort of follow a more traditional, I do more of the cooking and the cleaning and that sort of thing, but he works his butt off, on our property and
Sure.
for our family. I mean, there's not a dominant force between the two of us. But so for me, I don't really like to see the way the more sort of left-leaning politics are going. I feel that they're getting rather extreme, and so I guess I'm kind of been by default becoming more conservative.
So what does that mean, Amber? Are you talking about everybody having the possibility of health care or free college? Is that what?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So you don't think that all Americans should have health care? We have a fire department to protect our house, but
I didn't say that. Okay. What I definitely disagree with is free college for everyone. I think that that's a sweeping statement, and I think that it needs to be considered. This big like socialist lean and like all these social programs where. I just think it's going overboard.
Well, let me ask you a question in that context, if I can. I'm sorry to be interrupting you, but I only have about 2 minutes here until we hit the end of the hour.
Okay.
If the United States is the only advanced democracy in the world, the 34 OECD countries, we're the only one that doesn't provide free college. In fact, most of the European countries subsidize college. You go to college for free, and they give you a $200 a month check. The reason for this is because of the experience that we had with the GI Bill. What we learned with the GI Bill, which ended in 63, 64, 65, and we were able to look back at it in the 80s, and there were some really good studies on this done, is that people in particular, like my wife's dad, Louisa's dad, who became the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan, went to law school on the GI Bill. What we learned was that for every dollar we invested in the education of these young men coming back from World War II, and most of them were men, for every dollar we invested in them, 40 years later, the federal government itself, which had invested that dollar, the federal government itself had received $7 additional in tax revenue that they wouldn't have gotten had those people had lower income jobs as laborers.
Can I just make one point since we're going to get cut short and you have the floor as long as you'd like it? And I appreciate the information.
It's yours.
So my thing is that, like I said, it's too big of a sweeping statement. I don't disagree that people should have better access to higher education, but I know for me personally, I wasted my time in college. It was a waste of money, and I wasn't ready. And I think that if we have free college for everyone, you're going to have all these 18-year-old kids going there because it's free, and all of a sudden they have access to it, and wasting tons of valuable years of their lives, tons of valuable energy in their lives, and taxpayers' money. I think that there should be more preparation for trade schools and for, skilled labor jobs before we just start putting everyone into liberal educations that don't necessarily produce skilled employees.
Well, everybody who's advocating free college is advocating free trade school, too.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that. But also, I think that there should be I think there needs to be sort of qualifying examinations and more effort towards
there always
preparation of that.
You can't get into college in Denmark if you don't have good grades. But if you do have good grades, you go to college, they pay you $250 a month. What's wrong with that?
I don't know. I'd have to look into Denmark. I mean, Denmark's an interesting example. It's not like Denmark exists on their own. I mean, all of these Scandinavian nations are getting tons of defense funding from us. It's not like they, sit by themselves and are self-sufficient. I mean, there's always sort of
we're not giving any money to Denmark. I agree that NATO is protecting Denmark, but Denmark actually has a military, and they do spend 2% of their budget on NATO. So, but anyhow, Amber, thank you for calling and talking with me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Amber. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Speech TV is supported by your contributions, and I strongly encourage you during the pledge drives, or even not during the pledge drives, to call Free Speech TV at 877-378-8669 and make a contribution, support Free Speech TV. But that said, our program, the Thom Hartmann Program, what you're watching right now, is sustained by commercial advertising, and we're on commercial stations around the country. We run ads, they pay us for that. And one of the ways that you can support our program is by going to thomhartmann.com, our website, and clicking on the advertisements on that page for our sponsors and buying their products, supporting their products, or letting them know that you care about their products and that you support our show. That's thomhartmann.com, and click on the advertising there to support our program. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your supporting Free Speech TV by your ongoing, calling and supporting the fundraising drives, and we also would really appreciate if you go to thomhartmann.com. Through power, it's easier than we think. This is from the first chapter. It's titled Plutocracy of Maximums, Democracy of Minimums. When I was a student at Princeton University, I learned from my anthropology studies the concentration of power in the hands of a few is common to all cultures, societies, nations, tribes, cities, towns, and villages. Even where the thirst for self-governance and democracy is strong, as was the case in New England towns before the American Revolution against King George III, wealthy Tories were there too. In central and western Massachusetts, the farmers used the term the river gods to describe the rich merchants using the Connecticut River as a possible profitable trading route. These days, most people protesting for economic justice use the term the 1% to describe the ultra-small group of people who wield enormous influence over our society today. There is something about the differences in skill, determination, lineage, avarice, and pure luck that stratifies most people from the rulers who dominate them. In the political realm, the few become dominant because they hoard wealth and are driven to exercise power over others. When a small group rules a society, the political system is considered an oligarchy. And when only money and wealth determine how a society is controlled, the political system is a plutocracy. From the standpoint of a democratic society, both oligarchy and plutocracy are inherently unjust and corrupt. Of course, there are variations in the degrees of authoritarianism and cruelty that each system exercises over the communities it relies on for workers and wealth. Scholars have resorted to using phrases like benign dictatorship or wise rules or paternalistic hierarchies to describe lighter touches by those few who impose their rule over the many. Thomas Paine simply called them tyrannies. People, families, and communities can only take so much abuse before they rise up to resist. The job of the rulers is always to find that line and provide the lowest level of pay, security, housing, consumer protection, healthcare, and political access for society so that they can extract and hoard the greatest amount of wealth, power, and immunity from justice for themselves. In many ways, the majority of Americans live in a democracy of minimums, while the privileged few enjoy a plutocracy of maximums. This small volume is not just about the ravages of power or the assaults against disadvantaged and downtrodden communities. The subject here is the dominating influence of the 1% in business, politics, health, education, and society as a whole. Over the past 50 years, Americans have suffered the relentless commercialization of everyday life, their privacy and their childhoods, their parks and prisons, their public budgets and foreign policy, their schools and religious institutions, their elections and governments, and the most basic societal institutions of them all, the family. Consider all the family functions that have been outsourced to business. Eating, cleaning, childcare, counseling, therapy, entertainment, sports, lawn work, simple repairs have been increasingly commercialized, commodified, packaged, and marketed back to us as products of luxury and convenience. Even mother's breast milk has been displaced by infant formula. In a plutocracy, commercialism dominates far beyond the realm of economics and business. Everything is for sale, and money is power. But in an authentic democracy, there must be commercial-free zones where the power of human rights, citizenship, community, equality, and justice are free from the corrupting influence of money. Our elections and our governments should be such commercial-free zones. Our environment, air, and water should never fall under the control of corporations or private owners. Children should not be programmed by a huckstering economy where their vulnerable consciousness becomes the target of relentless corporate marketing and advertising. American history demonstrates that whenever commerce dominates all aspects of national life, a host of ills and atrocities have not just festered and spread, but become normal. Enslavement, land grabs, war, ethnic cleansing, serfdom, child labor, abusive working conditions, corrupt political systems, environmental contamination, and immunity from the law for the privileged few. History also shows that whenever there have been periods when enough of the country organizes and resists, we see movements of people and communities breaking through power. Progress is made, rights are won, education and literacy increase, oppression is diminished. It was in this manner that people of conscience abolished the living nightmare imposed by the laws and whips of white enslavers. The nation moved closer to promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We won more control over our work, our food, our land, our air, and our water. Women secured the right to vote. Civil rights were elevated and enforced. Public schools improved environments. Workplace collective bargaining and consumer protections did not spontaneously evolve. They were won by people demanding them and breaking through power. These moments of great progress are expressed in terms of new legislation, regulations, and judicial decisions that directly benefit life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The book, Breaking Through Power, by Ralph Nader. Breaking Through Power, it's easier than we think.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Regulation.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be continuing our conversation from the previous hour about what is the deal with Republican women. 70% of Republican women support Brett Kavanaugh, and a higher percentage of that than that, something like 80 some odd percent, support Donald Trump. Which seems kind of like a position that women wouldn't want to take, given Donald Trump's history and what we've learned of Brett Kavanaugh's history. And what does this tell us about this group of people? It's probably 15 or 20% of our population that apparently believe in hierarchy and patriarchy, and well, I guess that would be a conservative worldview. You know, things are as they should be, and they should continue as they are with minor adjustment. It's kind of the definition of conservative. William F. Buckley used to say a conservative is a man who stands athwart the arc of history with his hand out shouting, "Stop." In other words, yeah, we want to move forward, we want progress, but we want it slowly, gradually, carefully, calibrated. Now, that's the historic meaning of conservative, and I think probably many conservative women would fall into that category. I know certainly many conservative men do. But then the modern day definition of conservative that emerged with the Ronald Reagan presidency has been reformed to be basically conservative means in favor of whatever is going to benefit really rich people and big corporations. Now, there are these issues that kind of float around the bottom that have popped to the top as major issues, things like guns and abortion, which don't seem to have so much to do with rich people and corporations, although the gun thing, you could argue, has been fueled since the 70s and the 80s by the weapons industry funding the National Rifle Association and then them funding Republican politicians, a little help from Russia. But, you know, the question, you know, what is it that are these women who simply want to have the, oh yeah, I'm going to stay home and take care of the kids, and dad's going to go off to work, and this is how it's going to be? And then the other question is, you know, in my mind, is when women in that position suddenly discover that their husband is leaving them, or he dies, or is having an affair, or something like that, how do they, how do their politics change when suddenly they're thrown out into the world? I don't know. Anyhow, we had a whole bunch of quotes in the last hour. The other thing that I think is fascinating. Oh, and Resistance Stevie tweeted me, organized religion has a profound effect on the patriarchal, submissive worldview of women. There are no prominent women in religion. I would say, Mary Magdalene, or excuse me, Mary, the mother of Jesus, kind of. But anyhow, there are no prominent women. But she's been so discounted since the 1500s, when the Catholic Church went on their witch burning campaigns. Anyhow, there are no prominent women in religion. The showbiz factor, the pageantry, is all male of the church. There are no positive gender roles in religion for young girls. By and large, I'd say that's absolutely true. Does that have anything to do with it? So that, number one. Number two, Greg Palast was with us in the previous hour, and he was live from Georgia, and he was talking about how Brian Kemp, the Republican who's running for governor against Stacey Abrams, a white man running against a black woman, Brian Kemp, the Republican, Secretary of State. As Secretary of State, he controls the voting rolls. And last year, 2017, he removed 1 in 10 Georgia voters from the voting rolls. And Greg is suing him, and he just got the list, and he shared this with the Southern Christian Leadership Council. And they started just going through phone books and calling people up and saying, hey, you were just purged from the voting roll because Brian Kemp says you no longer live here. Are you who you say you are? Yes, I am, and I thought I was registered to vote. Over and over and over again, particularly in Black and Hispanic communities, and particularly among young people. It's really astounding. And so Greg has the entire list. If you're in Georgia, or if you know anybody in Georgia, go to, or tell them to go to, Greg Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T, gregpalast.com, and look at the Georgia voter list. And you can see if you have been purged, or if you're still on the list. So we've got that. And then, I started the show, actually, with this quote from Adam Smith about how we tend to worship great wealth, and how this is one of the great problems that we face in these our kinds of societies, is that, we're worshiping great wealth. And I think Donald Trump is a manifestation of that. We're seeing now, the New York Times just released this, massive article that is looking into Donald Trump's history of tax fraud and lies, and how he hustled all this money out of his father. He kept he was making $200,000 a year when he was 2 years old, 3 years old. By the time he was 8 years old, he was worth $1 million. This is not a rags to riches story. As of now, he has taken over $413 million from his father's estate. His father had $1 billion estate. And according to the New York Times, he and his brother and sister, who is, by the way, his sister is a federal judge, he and his brother and sister participated in tax fraud schemes that defrauded the federal government of about half $1 billion, which means that you and I picked up the bill for Donald Trump and his brother and sister's tax fraud, if the New York Times is correct. That he is continuing, by the way, to receive money from his father's estate. Even though his dad died, by the time his dad died in 1999, Trump had taken $413 million from his dad. And he kept having businesses fail, and his dad kept stepping in to prop them up. And so now the tax department is looking into this. What I would say is interesting, the thing that I found most fascinating, and it's a conclusion that the New York Times didn't draw, I am drawing this, was that up until 1999, every time Donald Trump fell, his daddy caught him, to the tune of millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. After 1999, he didn't have his daddy to catch him anymore. And he had some real serious problems during that era. I mean, it was in 1991 that his biggest casino failed. And this was after his daddy went in and bought $3.5 million worth of chips and then didn't play them as a way of laundering $3.5 million to the casino, which was a crime And the New Jersey casino regulators said it was a crime, and they fined Donald Trump over $50,000 for it, a fine that he paid. And then in 1992, his other casinos went bankrupt, along with his biggest property in New York. And at that point in time, by that point in time, he had taken hundreds of millions of dollars from his father. But his father died in 1999, and in 2004, he ended up filing bankruptcy for the entire hotel and entertainment business. In 2004, Daddy wasn't around to catch him anymore. So this is where we go to, and the last thing that, in fact, is borne out by this was that the main thing that saved Donald Trump was 9/11. 9/11 tightened up all these loopholes for money laundering because they were trying to catch Saudi money coming into the United States. So they closed all these loopholes, all these ways that you could launder money. And what that meant, this is, September of 2011, these laws were put into place early in 2012. What that meant was that, 2001, 2002. What that meant was that suddenly there was all this money coming from billionaire oligarchs around the world, Malaysia, Russia, Indonesia, you name it. And they wanted to throw money into something and launder it, get it out of their country, get it out of in many cases, their very poor countries. But all the normal loopholes had been shut down. The banks were being monitored. What can we do? Real estate. Real estate actually has an exemption to those money laundering rules that were passed after 9/11. And guess who was in the real estate business? Donald Trump. So Daddy stopped catching him, and instead corrupt billionaire oligarchs from overseas, particularly Russia, but other countries as well, all bailed him out, while you and I picked up the tax bill. Donald Trump has gone from having a business based on basically squeezing money out of his daddy and making it look like he's successful to having a business where he's running an elaborate money laundering operation, a criminal money laundering operation, and trying to pretend that he's got a successful business. And the only reason that any of us believed him was, 10 years on The Apprentice, where, which was, it's not actually reality TV, it's heavily scripted TV. And it is basically pitching the idea that Donald Trump is some sort of benevolent but tough business genius. And he's not. He's a little rich kid who keeps blowing it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And then blames it on other people, and then gets people to front for him, and then rips off people through bankruptcies and simply not paying bills. The guy is a con artist. It's the Music Man. And welcome back. Pick up some of your phone calls here. Cliff, watching Free Speech TV in Canyon Country, California. Hey, Chris. Hey, Cliff. What's up?
Morning, Tom.
Morning.
A week or two ago, you had a young lady on who was super knowledgeable about cannabis, and you guys started talking about munchies.
Yeah, we're probably going to have her on every month.
Yeah, she's great. But you mentioned that you like to have like a sliced cucumber or sliced tomato with salt.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, you're a better man than I, brother. I'm going for the ice cream or the pastry.
Yeah. Last night I broke into the ice cream too. I'm What can I say?
I'll take you off of your pedestal a little bit.
Thank you.
Hey, so we've been hearing about this blue wave coming, right? We've been hearing it on the corporate news, all the talking heads.
Yeah.
I mean, the way they're talking, the House is a lock and the Senate's up for grabs. But I'm not hearing much about our election integrity, Tom. This is going way back before in Ohio with Bush,
yeah.
And then with Florida.
Diebold and Wally O'Dell. Is that what you're talking about?
No, Blackwell.
Ken Blackwell, yeah. And then
Yeah.
Wally O'Dell was the head of Diebold, and he was also the head of the Republican Party in Ohio, and he wrote that famous letter saying that he was committed to making sure that Trump got the election.
Yeah, so I mean, this voting irregularities go way back, but it was just a few months ago there was a convention where they took some random people out of the crowd and they hacked into these voting machines in a few minutes, a bunch of them.
Yeah, less than 10 minutes.
This is what we're dealing with right now. In addition, we have foreign entities hacking away at us.
Yep.
So I'm just warning that before people start guaranteeing victory for the Democrats. We need to be on top of this voting thing.
Oh, this is the one thing that is going to cause Republicans to get elected all across the country, particularly in states where the Secretary of State is a Republican and is doing Chris Kobach's bidding, is you're going to see Republicans win in states where the polls said that Democrats would win, or in states where polls said that it was a toss-up. You're going to see Republicans win by 1, 2, 3 points. In some cases, 5 or 6 points, not because more people voted for the Republicans, but because more people voted on provisional ballots for Democrats, and those ballots were never counted because their names had been taken off the rolls. This is the new voter suppression.
They've been purged.
Yeah,
they've been purged. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and this is what we heard Greg Palast talk about, 30 minutes ago, about an hour ago now.
So what can our Democratic leaders do before the elections to help, the integrity of our voting? I mean, they got to be aware of what's going on.
Oh, they are acutely aware of what's going on. They have been for a long, long time. And now they're finally starting to talk about it. And there is legislation. Yesterday when Mark Pocan was on, he was talking about voter integrity legislation that he and other members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus are putting forward right now. Paper ballots and things like this, audits. There's a lot that needs to be done, and the Democrats are all up for doing it. But the reality is that Paul Ryan will not even allow these things out of committee, much less to come to the floor of the House. So what we need to do is, they're going to steal elections by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points by pushing people off the voting rolls. So we have to show up by 7, 8, 9, 10 points. We have to get everybody out, and we have to get out, and get ourselves out and make sure that we're registered to vote. Cliff, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Free Speech TV is supported by your contributions, and I strongly encourage you during the pledge drives, or even not during the pledge drives, to call Free Speech TV at 877-378-8669 and make a contribution, support Free Speech TV. But that said, our program, the Thom Hartmann Program, what you're watching right now, is sustained by commercial advertising, and we're on commercial stations around the country. We run ads. They pay us for that. And one of the ways that you can support our program is by going to thomhartmann.com, our website, and clicking on the advertisements on that page for our sponsors and buying their products, supporting their products, or letting them know that you care about their products and that you support our show. That's thomhartmann.com, and click on the advertising there to support our program. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your supporting Free Speech TV by your ongoing, calling and supporting the fundraising drives, and we also would really appreciate if you go to thomhartmann.com.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Let's pick up some of your calls, some of your thoughts on all of these things that we've been talking about. And there is so much depth and breadth to this. I think it's just an incredibly extraordinary moment that we live in. Wendy in Ohio. Hey, Wendy, what's on your mind?
Wow. Hi, Tom. I can't believe I'm on.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so
for calling.
Yeah, I think you've actually figured out most of it. I think you're kind of on track with conservative women. Some of the thoughts I've heard you discuss today, and my sister, she's conservative, and I'm totally not conservative. I mean, I'm liberal. And she just turned 60, in fact. And she was very, we come from a family with two very well-educated parents. I mean, and we're Jewish. So religion's not really an issue because we're not religious. So that's really not part of the mix. But, I look at my sister, and I'm really, it's fascinating that we could be so different this way.
Does she watch Fox News?
Does she watch it? As far as I know, they watch regular, like CBS News in the evening.
Right. Okay.
But her husband's big on the Drudge Report. I know he looks at that a lot.
Yeah.
My sister is really not that immersed into news, and in fact, I think she's not that interested at all. But she was actually very successful in her career. She just retired last year, and she did way better than her husband. Very, very smart, a lot of common sense. I think my sister tends to see things in a very black and white way, whereas my mind, I guess, is probably more left brain. And I think I'm more of a creative type. My sister's not that way, and it does make one think, what are the differences between?
So you think this is temperamental, like well, for example, Carl Jung came up with this idea of introverts and extroverts, and judgers and perceivers, and I think the judgers and perceivers is actually the bigger part of it, and that this small percentage of us, 20% roughly, see the world in black and white. Things are right or wrong. Yes. There is no gray area. There's no middle ground. And then the other 80% of us are, painfully aware of the middle ground and can understand both sides of an argument. Are you suggesting that that's the difference? I
totally agree with you. And I also think it is multifactorial, because I think my sister, she also, what was I going to say? She kind of closes herself off from the world. I mean, she doesn't want to know anything outside of her comfort zone. And she's also bought into, all those old ideas. I mean, I'm like, you and I are both from the same generation for the most part. Our parents served in World War II. They got the GI Bill. My parents raised 5 kids. And, they did like probably your parents did. I mean, fairly well. Yeah. And I think there's actually an ignorance, a lack of awareness for people like my sister. Even though she's so smart, she's basically well educated. She got her master's, but they don't get. There's that piece that they don't see in the history and how and that extra layer of things that I see, like that I listen to on your show about how it is, the fact that my parents were so well educated, that is what sort of helped my sister and myself and my one brother who has a law degree, and it kind of propelled us into that world. And I don't think she sees that. Yeah, well, that's the social capital. The thing with conservative women, she thinks that, I got to where I got to because of my ethics, my work ethic. Right. I worked for it. Well, yeah, she did work for it. But you know what? You talk about this all the time. It's like, it's where you were born. It's who you were born to. And we lucked out. My parents were, got their degrees. They did well in life. And then so we benefited from what they got. Right. My sister really believes that she is solely responsible for how she got to where she got. And by the way, I also think that this wealth thing that you're talking about, that goes along with it, because, she earned a very good living. They have a beautiful house. My sister was the big breadwinner in that family. And so her husband has been into the stocks and the capital gains and all that garbage. And so that plays a big importance, I think, in how they make their decisions. That's why they vote Republican. It's interesting. It's kind of an interesting world, too, because I used to spend a lot of time on investment websites, and I've given it up entirely now. But I noticed that, so many of them are run by guys who are right-wing trolls. I mean, they're just vulgar in the way they talk, and particularly the way they talk about liberals. And they're offering investment advice. It's pretty startling. Wendy, thank you for the call, and thanks for sharing your perspective on who these conservative women are, where they come from, and why they would believe Brett Kavanaugh.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Well, for that matter, why 53% of them would vote for Donald Trump, and it looks like probably 50% of them are going to do it again. We'll be back. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Notes on Debates in the Federal Convention of 1787, reported by James Madison. That would be the Constitutional Convention where everybody got together and wrote the Constitution. This is from Wednesday, August 22nd. Article 7, Section 4, resumed. Mr. Sherman was, and this is Madison's notes, so he's reporting what Mr. Sherman said. Mr. Sherman was for leaving the clause as it stands. He disapproved of the slave trade. Yet as the states were now possessed of the right to import slaves, as the public good did not require it to be taken from them, and as it was expedient to have as few objections as possible to the proposed scheme of government. The proposal, by the way, was to ban the importation of slaves after 1808 with the assumption that the states would rapidly end slavery shortly thereafter. And you'll hear that in just a minute. It was expedient to have as few objections as possible to the proposed scheme of government. He thought it best to leave the matter as we find it. He observed that the abolition of slavery seemed to be going on in the U.S. and that the good sense of the several states would probably by degrees complete it soon. He urged on the convention the necessity of dispatching its business. Colonel Mason spoke. This infernal traffic originated in the avarice of British nations. The British government constantly checked the attempts of Virginia to put a stop to it. The present question concerns not the importing of slaves alone, but the whole Union. The evil of having slaves was experienced during the late war. Had slaves been treated as they might have been by the enemy, they would have proved dangerous instruments in their hands. What he's talking about is the British offering slaves freedom if they came and fought for the British. But their folly dealt by the slaves as it did by the Tories. He mentioned the dangerous insurrections of the slaves in Greece and Sicily and the instructions given to by Cromwell to the commissioners sent to Virginia to arm the servants and slaves in case other means of obtaining its submission should fail. Maryland and Virginia had had already prohibited the importation of slaves expressly. North Carolina had done the same in substance. All this would be in vain if South Carolina and Georgia were at liberty to import. The Western people are already calling out for slaves for their new lands and will fill that country with slaves if they can be got through South Carolina and Georgia. Slavery discourages arts and manufactures. The poor despise labor when performed by slaves. They prevent the immigration of whites. They produce the most pernicious effect on manners. Every master of slaves is born a petty tyrant. They bring the judgment of heaven on a country. As nations cannot be rewarded or punished in the next world, they must be in this. By an inevitable chain of causes and effects, providence punishes national sins by national calamities. He lamented that some of our Eastern brethren had, from a lust of gain, embarked in this nefarious traffic. As to the states being in possession of the right to import, this was the case with many other rights now to be properly given up. He held it essential in every point of view that when the general government should have the power to the general government should have the power to prevent the increase of slavery. Mr. Ellsworth rose to spoke. As he had never owned a slave, could not judge on the effects of slavery on character. He said, however, that if it was to be considered in a moral light, we ought to go farther and free those already in our country. As slaves also multiply so fast in Virginia and Maryland that it is cheaper to raise than import them, whilst in the sickly rice swamps foreign supplies are necessary, if we go no further than is urged, we shall be unjust toward South Carolina and Georgia. Let us not intermeddle. As population increases, poor laborers will be so plenty as to render slaves useless. Slavery in time will not be a speck in our country. Provision is already made in Connecticut for abolishing it, and the abolition has already taken place in Massachusetts. As to the danger of insurrections from foreign influence, that will become a motive to kind treatment of the slaves and former slaves. Mr. Pinckney, if slavery be wrong, it is justified by the example of all the world. He cited the case of Greece, Rome, and other ancient states, the sanction given by France, England, Holland, and other modern states. In all ages, 1/2 of mankind have been slaves. If the southern states were let alone, they would probably of themselves stop importations. He would himself, as a citizen of South Carolina, vote for it. An attempt to take away the right as proposed will produce serious objections to the Constitution, which he wished to see adopted. General Pinckney rose to speak and declared it to be his firm opinion that if himself and all his colleagues were to sign the Constitution and use their personal influence, it would be of no avail towards obtaining the assent of their constituents. South Carolina and Georgia cannot do without slaves. As to Virginia, she will gain by stopping the importation. Her slaves will rise in value, and she has more than she wants. It would be unequal to require South Carolina and Georgia to confederate on such unequal terms. He said the royal assent before the Revolution had never been refused to South Carolina, as to Virginia. He contended that the importation of slaves would be for the interest of the whole Union. The more slaves, the more produce to employ the carrying trade, the more consumption also, and the more of this, the more of revenue for the common treasury. He admitted it to be reasonable that slaves should be dutied like other imports, but should consider a rejection of the clause as an exclusion of South Carolina from the Union. Mr. Baldwin rose to speak, said he had conceived national objects alone to be before the convention, not such as like the present were of a local nature. Georgia was decided on this point. That state was always hitherto supposed a general government. And on it goes. It's a fascinating insight into what these guys were thinking and debating.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
All aboard. It's a once-in-a-lifetime luxury Alaskan cruise on the Regent Seven Seas Mariner, July 24th, 2019. For more information, Keen Luxury Travel, 800-856-1155. And did I mention we'll be getting active on board with special events with yours truly, me and Louise, as we visit Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, Hubbard Glacier, and Anchorage. Back, Thom Hartmann here with you. Sorry about the music there. Okay, time for a geeky science alert. Indeed, geeky science. This is fascinating. You know, the human papillomavirus, which is a wart virus, basically, has been found to be the cause of cervical cancer. That it definitely causes cervical cancer, which is a cancer that's almost always fatal because it's so hard to detect, and it's just, I mean, it's, or not almost always fatal, but it's a very, very deadly cancer that exclusively hits women. And so, you know, they developed a vaccine for this because it's a virus that carries this, it is a virus, the HPV. They developed a vaccine for it. And back, I think this was during the Clinton administration, the proposal was, let's vaccinate every teenage girl in America, and ultimately let's get to vaccinating all the boys as well, and we'll do away with HPV, with the virus, and thus we'll do away with cervical cancer. And the religious right came down on this and said, oh no, you can't do that. If kids think that they can have sex without getting cancer, they're more likely to have sex. So American women are still dying from cervical cancer at shocking rates. But here comes this story. This is the New York Times today. The headline, in Australia, cervical cancer could soon be eliminated. This was a study published in The Lancet, the British medical journal, found that by 2028, fewer than 4 of every 100,000 women in Australia will be diagnosed with cervical cancer. Effectively eliminating that disease is a public health problem. And by 2066, they say they're going to be down to 1 woman per 100,000 getting cervical cancer. Karen Canfell, a cancer epidemiologist and director of cancer research, said Australia is on track to become the first country to eliminate cervical cancer. They introduced this program in 2007 as a cost-free 3-dose course for teenage girls. In 2013, the program was expanded to school-age boys who carry and transmit the virus. The vaccination program has led to a 77% reduction in the types of human papillomavirus, HPV, most responsible for cervical cancer. And Australia now has the lowest cervical cancer incidence, finding it, and mortality, dying from it, the lowest rates in the world. Amazing story. So anyhow, let's pick up your phone calls. Deanna, am I saying that right, in Redding, California?
Yes,
Hey.
I've called before. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
Oh, there's so many things to talk about. I wanted to say 2 things. California is doing the free first-year college for students now. Governor Brown just signed that. Yeah, into law, and it's for qualified students. So Dutch. The other is 2 shows I saw last night, but the second one is called Dark Money, and it's about the ALEC organization supporting only the Republicans who signed the paper. And it's not just ALEC; it's other dark money that comes in. And the example was Montana. The state of Montana rebelled against it, and they have signed a bill into law that candidates, Republican candidates, have to show their money sources. And actually, this weekend, a representative from Montana back in 2010 took the dark money and has been relieved of duty since then. and it goes against even the Republicans that do not sign up for their program, which is a complete program of funding all the way through to helping them door to door campaigning for these Republicans. And I think that this conspiracy theory I'm talking about has reached into the Congress and probably the Senate. And this is the reason that these congressmen are voting as a bloc. And they'll do that in every
The conspiracy theory is what? What did I miss?
Well, the conspiracy theory of dark money, private.
Oh, it's not a conspiracy theory. That's a proven fact. I mean, Jane Mayer wrote the book Dark Money on that. It's
Yeah,
okay.
Unequal protection is what you were just talking about.
I wrote a book called Unequal Protection. Jane Mayer wrote a book called Dark Money. No, spot on. In fact, people, I just saw an op-ed this morning in the Washington Post going, kind of wringing their hands. Why is it that we are so divided? Well, we're so divided because since the 1980s, a small group of billionaires have been funding the Republican Party and saying, you must take these positions on pollution, on environmental regulation, on quote, socialism, Medicare, Medicaid, things like that. You must take these positions or we will not give you money anymore. And
yes, and this documentary last night between 3 and 4 a.m., which is when nobody's watching TV, showed all of this happening in Montana. From step one all the way through to the changing of their laws. Now, my friends up in Washington are going through this. They're unionized. My friends in a union, caregivers union, one of the strongest in the country now, I guess. But they have had to deal with ALEC and other dark monies.
Right.
Deunionization.
That's
to work laws.
That's another one of their demands. Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Diana, I want to get some more callers in here, but thank you. That's an important addition to the conversation. Sharon in Sonora, California. Hey, Sharon, what's on your mind?
Good morning. I am calling because of the lady that was talking about women and the subservience of women to men energy kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I actually have pondered that since I was a kid. I have no understanding. Watching boys throw girls into thorn bushes and the girls giggling. I've pondered that since I was a kid. And my theory is it really comes to being around the religious background and how we, as Christians, are taught that Eve was bad because she introduced the apples.
Right, original sin.
Original sin.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, original sin is the rationalization for a need for a savior, right? Because we're born by women, born out of women. Therefore, God's Son has to die to save us from the evil of those women. And this all seems to have come out of the agricultural revolution, by and large. That the agricultural revolution gave a small number of people the ability to control a large amount of food, and thus came kings and kingdoms, and out of that came patriarchy, and out of patriarchy came monotheism, and out of these monotheistic religions, every single one of them, of the monotheistic religions, the God figure has a penis, is a man, and all of the more subservient figures within those religions, or the evil figures, or the stupid figures, Lot's wife, are women. Back to you.
Right. And if you go back far enough, a lot of this also started with discovering that it took a sperm to create children. So the pregnancy, once that was discovered, then you found women being put in chastity belts and a lot of other things covering up their hair and their bodies. And my theory kind of is that this kind of runs through almost all religions, although I haven't had the ability to totally check it out, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Well, there's a variation on
religion.
Yeah, there's a variation on that, Sharon. Are you familiar with the homunculus theory?
No.
Okay, this is something I learned in high school biology. I had a biology teacher who was just a fascinating woman. She was brilliant, Miss Hemmer. And I didn't know this until I studied this, that up until the 1700s, when Van Leeuwenhoek, I don't know if he invented the microscope or was just the first to seriously use it, but prior to that, there was this theory of spontaneous generation. Where do things come from? Well, mice, for example, come from straw and wood. If you have straw and wood, you're going to have mice. They just spontaneously appear. And you know, and there was, but what they did know was that people had to have sex in order to have babies, and so the assumption was that somehow. And you know, when they first started looking at sperm in the microscope, in the very primitive microscopes, they were like, aha, this is the proof of it. What they thought the sperms were little tiny human beings, known as the homunculus. And these little tiny human beings were implanted in the toaster oven of the woman in her womb, and where they would grow. And there were all these efforts in the 17 and 1800s to turn sperm into human beings without women, to you know, to take male sperm and put it into cows' vaginas and all, you know, all other kinds of animals, and to try little toaster ovens and see if they could do this, because they really believed that the sperm were these little tiny people, and that women were just toaster ovens. And now we know it's a 50-50 affair. But this whole theory of women as toaster ovens was held for several hundred years apparently, and I, you know, geez, sometimes you think that some people still think of that, but that immediately diminished the status, the stature of women in the reproductive process.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's diminished us as far as just the social network or the social fabric.
Right, and how dare you have an abortion and take that homunculus that came from that man, after all, and remove that from your body? Are you kidding? I mean, that's where that stuff goes.
Yeah, yeah. And a sub note before we say goodbye, and that is that when I watched the first program of The Apprentice, and I said, that man, and I didn't know the term at that time, but I said, that man's a con man.
Yeah.
Which I think you're calling a grifter.
Yeah, yeah. In the first hour of the show, I was talking about The Music Man. Louise and I watching The Music Man on Sunday. And the only difference is he is not the Harold, what's his name, Harold Hill. Harold Hill was charming. He was friendly. He was gracious. He turned out to be a con man with a good heart at the end of the show. Donald Trump is not a con man with a good heart. Sharon, thank you. Thanks for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Ellen Ratner and Talk Media News in about 4 minutes. Stick around. Welcome back. Julie in Port Angeles, Washington. Hey, Julie, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Julie.
I'm still getting over the toaster oven. That's hilarious.
In a way.
I just wanted to talk. Yeah, right. Scary. Just a comment. I live in a Trump county, and I'm hang with liberals, and have a great life here. But 3 of my closest friends from childhood are voted for Donald Trump, and they're the one thing I would say is that they're just ill-informed. These
really, 3 are women?
Yes. One, she pretty much goes on prophecy from the Bible. She's very religious. The other one sort of listens to what her husband says. They're very hardworking women. They're lovely women, but they're uninformed, just like the woman that thought that we were giving Denmark all sorts of money, and you rattled off that they, have 2% of their budget for military.
Right.
They just don't know, and they're not willing to dig because they're so comfortable. So that's just my 100% of the 3 women that I'm very close with that voted for Trump. The other interesting thing I found was none of them gave to the food bank, and I just happened on that by just talking about it. And so then I asked the third person, and they don't. One through the church does some charity stuff, but they don't. They feel like they have their own charities and take care of it that way, but they don't. A different calling of the heart seems to be to me.
Well, one of the interesting things that every TV preacher knows is that the more wealthy somebody is, the less likely they are to give you money. And it is, particularly in the context of religion, where, and particularly the prosperity religions that teach that if you give money, if you tithe, you'll get 10 times back what you give, or more than 20 times back what you give, is that, the preachers are reaching out to low-income people, by and large. But people like your friends who are comfortable tend to become less compassionate, less empathetic. The more comfortable we are, the more easily we seal out, the images of homelessness or unemployment or the other challenges that people have in their lives. It's very easy to just ignore that stuff. And that's why I was kind of wondering out loud. I was looking at my mother's story of, being a housewife and not even literally giving up her driver's license in her 20s. And was that because this is a comfortable niche? This is what she had been told all her life she would grow up to be someday, and she had exactly what she wanted, and it was kind of cool, and, why rock the boat?
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I have very liberal friends, too, that are quite wealthy, but they're very giving, so that's hard for me to realize what you're saying.
Well, it's not entirely wealth,
overall,
obviously.
Right. Well, anyway, I just think they're ill-informed, and they don't really have the desire and the compassion to dig deeper into really what's going on on the planet. You know?
Yeah, and that's very unfortunate. Julie, thanks for the call. It's great talking with you.
Thanks for your program. All right, bye-bye.
My pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, this is a big issue. Who are these conservative women, and what is it that motivates them to think that having men run society is a good thing? I mean, I would say, obviously, it's men who have convinced them of that. But how and why? We'll be back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News is up next. Stick around. Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com, Ellen Ratner's charity with regard to South Sudan, and her new book, Loving What You Do. And on the line with us is Ellen Ratner herself. Hey, Ellen.
Well, hi. I'm telling you that it's interesting. The Fed today warned, the head of the Fed warned that we could not deal with a deficit increase if that happens. And what he basically said is that tax cuts and spending increases are fine as long as the economy's rolling along, but if it isn't so fine if the economy takes a dip. And that's a big concern, he said.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Also, there was a volcano that went off in Indonesia. This is the same place, of course, where there was an earthquake. They're not sure whether the two are related or not. They're looking into that right now. But these poor people, I mean, it is a mess over there.
Yeah, and you often see this where volcanoes trigger earthquakes or earthquakes can trigger a volcano. It's tough.
Right. Now, it's also interesting that Senator Flake, who, of course, is not running for re-election and said so on 60 Minutes on Sunday, he said there was no place for remarks by President Trump when he made fun of Dr. Ford yesterday at his event in Mississippi. And also, then Susan Collins said, and she is the senator from Maine, that it was just plain wrong for the president to do that.
Do you think that's going to influence their votes, or are they simply venting?
If I knew how Susan Collins thought, I'd be going to Las Vegas and betting on her, but I have no idea.
Yeah, she
does.
And,
of course, it depends how much pressure she's under. Now, we do know that one of the right-wing groups has taken out $400,000 of ads in North Dakota, where Heidi Heitkamp is, and in Jeff Merkley's area in West Virginia, to try and...
That'd be Joe Manchin in West Virginia.
Joe Manchin, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But what can I do? I'm an old bat.
Welcome to the club.
So that is very interesting. Now, the president also tweeted on the... Now, by the way, I was just on a conference call, and one of the things they said is that with the Kavanaugh information that the FBI is supposedly interviewing people, but they think the White House is in charge of it, although they don't know, they said that there's going to be one copy, and you're not allowed to make copies of it, and it's going to be shared with all of the senators. Can you imagine one document shared between 100 people?
Wow.
I mean, if that's true, that's just outrageous.
Well, the whole thing is outrageous. The fact that the FBI has been doing this with handcuffs on, and blinders is pretty outrageous. I'm concerned in a way that is kind of creepy, because I'm thinking, you know, this could be a real turning point for this country. But I'm concerned about what happens when Kavanaugh gets on the court, if Kavanaugh gets on the court. If that happens, how Americans are going to start viewing the legitimacy of the court in a very, very different way. And what's that going to lead to? Sorry?
That came up today in this conference call. And also they said, listen, if you did cocaine after you were 18 years old, you were automatically excluded. It didn't matter if you were 19 years old or 18, you know, and whatever months. But once you're 18, if you did cocaine, you were automatically excluded. How is exposing yourself to somebody not an exclusionary demand on Kavanaugh? I think that's very interesting.
Well, they just have to prove it. The problem is that Deborah Ramirez has apparently 20 witnesses, but the FBI is not being allowed to investigate to interview any of them. Yeah.
I mean, that was, you know, I've been on a lot of calls lately because people are interested in getting it to the press or the press. And obviously, this is just staggering that the FBI won't interview people. They think they're getting directions from the White House.
Yeah, well, they are. I mean, it's apparently quite clear. And the White House is refusing to release the marching orders that they gave the FBI. What else is going on in the world, Ellen?
Well, okay. So the president tweeted this morning on the New York Times investigation on his economy and what he did. Now, it's very interesting. The New York Times actually was able to get this information, part of it, their leads, from his sister, who is a federal judge, and she had to submit something under oath to the Congress when she was appointed. Right. And she said that she had gotten this money. So this is really interesting. The New York Times went and they got this. And that's how they were able to open up this investigation. Right, and she was getting like $1 million a year from this phony baloney company that they had set up to launder the profits from this building into the personal pockets of the kids, of Fred Trump's kids, even so that there would be no gift tax involved. Right. Now, also, I'm on the board, and I like to say this, of Reporters Without Borders. We're very concerned about a reporter, a Saudi reporter, who is anti the Saudi administration, who went to the mission in Turkey, to the consulate, to get something because he wanted to get married. And all of a sudden, he's missing. His girlfriend waited outside of the consulate all day, all night, did not come out, and we're very concerned about what happened to him. And that's another concern. Also, the United States has been asked by the International Criminal Court, which President Trump said was illegal, and they didn't pay any attention to lift sanctions on Iran for humanitarian reasons. But now the question is, will the United States pay any attention to what the ICC says? Yeah, we're blocking humanitarian efforts in that region if they may benefit Iran in any way, and that's pretty grim. I mean, you know, feeding kids. It's very, very grim. Yeah. Also, the World Trade Organization director was interviewed by a radio host today, and he said that he has never spoken with President Trump, that he speaks with all these world leaders all the time, that he has never spoken with President Trump. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So the other interesting thing is the United States has, the question is whether it's going to put any sanctions on India, because Russia is selling its missiles in Syria, and now the question is, will they sell them to India, and will the United States put sanctions on it? Whoa, that would be interesting to see India start to change allegiances. They're certainly getting a lot closer to China right now, and Trump is not helping that. Yeah, Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Great talking with you. GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and loving what you do. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking, he says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get them. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S-word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the 5th Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I didn't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. And Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told him to be quiet, and the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us and 1 in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, 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 de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, what's going on here? And Huey said, the same basic procedures that are supposed to go on. Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. Can I see that pistol there? One of the pigs said. No, you can't see it, Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, no, you can't see it. Huey said, no, you can't see the pistol, nor this, pointing to his rifle. And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it. Is that your pistol? He asked Huey. And I said, no, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol. I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, can I see it or not? So Huey said to me, I'll talk. And then he said to the pig, no, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it. Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not, the pig says. So I says, well, you can't see my pistol. The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, who the hell do you think you are? Look, damn it, Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on and they were bracing up like they were bad.
Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, "Who the hell do you think you are?" In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, "We have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it." The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1. And you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car, he dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. "Who do you think you all are anyway?" Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. "You move on down the street," said the pig. Huey started interrupting. "You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty." And these pigs, they listened to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale.
Free Speech TV is supported by your contributions, and I strongly encourage you during the pledge drives, or even not during the pledge drives, to call Free Speech TV at 877-378-8669 and make a contribution, support Free Speech TV. But that said, our program, the Thom Hartmann Program, what you're watching right now, is sustained by commercial advertising, and we're on commercial stations around the country. We run ads. They pay us for that. And one of the ways that you can support our program is by going to thomhartmann.com, our website, and clicking on the advertisements on that page for our sponsors and buying their products, supporting their products, or letting them know that you care about their products and that you support our show. That's thomhartmann.com, and click on the advertising there to support our program. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your supporting Free Speech TV by your ongoing, calling and supporting the fundraising drives, and we also would really appreciate if you go to thomhartmann.com.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
With you, the quote of the day, Adam Smith on the worship of the rich. And of course, this is in the context of Donald Trump being outed by the New York Times as a grifter, as a guy who, if Daddy hadn't given him over $400 million, money that he's to this day continuing to take from his father's estate. If his daddy hadn't bailed out, failing business after failing business after failing business, and when Daddy died in '99, in 2004, Donald Trump couldn't rely on Daddy, had to declare bankruptcy. But in 2004, when he declared bankruptcy, that was 3 years after 9/11, and 2 years after the laws were changed, making it really hard to launder money into the United States. If you're a foreign oligarch and you stole a bunch of money from your country or your company or your friends or whatever, and you wanted to launder that money into the United States so that it could be safely parked here for the day that you retire or whatever. It used to be you could launder it through banks. Remember HSBC, the bank, got busted for laundering hundreds of millions of dollars of literally terrorist money? Now, if it had been you or me doing that, obviously we'd be in prison for the rest of our lives. We'd probably be in Gitmo. But this was a bank, and so there's different rules for bankers. They don't go to jail. They don't get indicted. The bank got a fine. But, that's what used to go on. And they closed those loopholes in 2002 and 2003. So there was, but they left one loophole intentionally open. And that was cash sales of real estate. A cash sale of real estate did not have to be examined by banking regulators, by the FBI, by the SEC, by anybody. Cash sales of real estate were sacrosanct. They were just, that's just somebody buying real estate. And so suddenly, all over the world, there were these oligarchs who were like, I got to put my money in the United States. How do I do this? Oh, real estate. And you got Chinese oligarchs buying up the West Coast, and you've got Russian oligarchs buying up the East Coast, and Saudi oligarchs buying up the East Coast. And guess who just happened to be in the real estate business and desperately needed money because daddy had died? Donald Trump. And so he jumps into bed with these oligarchs. So anyhow, back to Adam Smith and the worship of the rich. This is in the Theory of Moral Sentiments, 1759, Part 1, Section 3, Chapter 2. He says, this disposition to admire and almost to worship the rich and powerful, and to despise or at least neglect persons of poor and mean conditions, is the great and most universal cause of the corruption of our moral sentiments. This is from Adam Smith. He wrote Wealth of Nations. This is from his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Speaking of ironies, mind-boggling ironies, Brett Kavanaugh was slapped with 2 official ethics complaints before the D.C. Circuit. And this gets real interesting. 2 ethics complaints before the D.C. Circuit against Brett Kavanaugh, and the judge who is going to decide these and oversee the process of investigating them is Merrick Garland. Boom. Yeah, that Merrick Garland. Meanwhile, we put into place rules after the Deepwater Horizon killed 11 people, spilled 5 million barrels of gas of oil into the Gulf, killed over 1 million birds, massive amounts of marine life. The area is still in many ways polluted and will be for centuries. And we put into place some rules, because remember the blowout protector didn't work, and so the well blew out. And so we said, well, in the future, if you're going to have you got to have a blowout protector, number one. Number two, it's got to be a kind that actually works. Can't be an old broken one. And number three, somebody has to inspect it regularly, like once a year. Well, the New York Times reported that the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement has said that, which was, by the way, created to stop another Deepwater Horizon, that the agency that is supposed to prevent the next Deepwater Horizon just put together a set of rules written by lobbyists for the fossil fuel industry, saying that the rules that were put into place back in 2003 and 2004, quote, created potentially unduly burdensome requirements. Now, they're not saying that they actually that these rules stop them from drilling for oil. What they're saying is that they could. It's potential. They also say that, and this is mind-boggling, this is a quote from this report. Energy dominance is encouraging increased domestic oil and gas production and reducing unnecessary burdens by stakeholders. The stakeholders in this case being the stockholders in the oil companies, Koch Industries, ExxonMobil, things like that. The stakeholders are clearly not the guys working on the rigs. It's clearly not the environment around the rigs. It's clearly not the people who live on the shore of affected by the rigs. It's clearly not the people who make their living pulling seafood out of the ocean that's affected by the rigs. The stakeholders are the wealthy stockholders, period. And they're the ones that this agency under Trump is saying, we're going to blow up the rules. They proposed a new rule that removes the requirement for independent verification of safety measures and equipment. So not only does this rule weaken safety and environmental standards, this is quoting Mark Sumner over at Daily Kos, not only does this new rule weaken safety and environmental standards, it removes any requirement at all that anyone check to see that the companies are following the standard. Deepwater Horizon coming again? Meanwhile, Bart Kavanaugh. Yeah, Bart. You didn't know? When he was asked by the senators, your classmates refer to you as Bart O'Kavanaugh. And he's like, oh, that was a joke. Well, Bart Kavanaugh wrote in 1983 a letter to his friends as they were arranging a condo rental for Beach Week. This is something that rich white boys do. Apparently very rich white boys. That, quote, someone should warn the neighbors that we're loud, obnoxious drunks with prolific pukers among us. Yeah, Ralphing. No, apparently it's not just a reference to spicy food. He also says, so he lied to Congress about that. He also said, I think we're unanimous that any girls we can beg to stay there are welcome with open arms. Yeah, he said he wasn't interested in sex. He was spending all his time on the basketball team and going to church. And the letter is signed FFFF Bart. Bart. And FFFF, find them, something them, forget them. Which is about women. And this is how he signed the letter, Bart, with these Fs. And when he was asked about those Fs before the Senate, he said, oh, that's because we had a friend who stuttered when he cursed. That's creative. It's also apparently another lie to the United States Senate. Bart Kavanaugh lied to the Senate about being Bart Kavanaugh. And yes, he actually signed the letter Bart Kavanaugh. You know, his friend Mark Judge wrote this book, and he was talking about Bart O'Kavanaugh, who was barfing in the back seat constantly. It was blacking out. And oh, yeah. Did you know that Bob Gale, I mentioned Back to the Future, I think it was on last week, in fact. Was it last week or Monday that we had, it was last Thursday, thank you, that we had Congressman Rokana, thank you. Congressman Rokana on, and I said Biff Tannen from Back to the Future it's kind of Donald Trump, and he was like, yeah. And Bob Gale is the writer of Back to the Future, and he back in 2005, Nate dug this up, October 2015, said, yep, Biff was based on Donald Trump. In other news, the Trump administration is suing California to squash its new net neutrality law. California has actually passed, and the governor has signed a net neutrality law. And so now the Trump administration is saying, oh, no, you don't. You're not going to step on the profits of Comcast. No way. Right. And the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, you know, this is this fellow Blankenstein has been installed at the CFPB by Mr. Trump and his buddies. And Eric Blankenstein is his name. He's the handpicked leader, Trump's handpicked leader for the Bureau's Fair Lending Division. In other words, the guy who's making sure that you don't get ripped off by your lender, whether it's your bank or your mortgage company or your credit card company or your student loans, that guy. He implied that calling somebody the N-word does not make them racist. This is, by the way, this is all from alliedprogress.org. You can find all this stuff. Carl Frisch's organization. He claimed that hate crime hoaxes are about 3 times as prevalent as actual hate crimes. He said that many hate crimes are hoaxes and therefore should not necessarily be governed under the University of Virginia's strict honor system until, quote, a hood-wearing KKK member is caught. He said this in response to the notion that hate crime should fall under UVA's honor system. Eric Blankenstein argued that hate crimes are just crimes, asking, what does it matter that someone got beat up just because they're black? He calls this racial idiocy when the University of Virginia's Dean of African American Affairs and president of the NAACP in Charlottesville, he on his blog, Two Guys Chatting, Blankenstein says, so there's more racial idiocy at UVA. Well, it can't be any worse than the African city in Detroit. Bizarre. He appeared to blame a woman's right to choose as the reason for pregnant women being murdered. Yep. He thinks abortions and abandoning children in dumpsters are the same thing. He lamented that women can F-word someone they shouldn't have and use abortion to, quote, get rid of the problem when men can't. Eric Blankenstein, the guy running the part of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that protects you from criminal lenders, he thinks criminalizing abortion is the right thing to do. He likens stem cell research to the Holocaust, indirectly compared John Kerry to Hitler, and says the average voter's kind of dumb. They just vote based on image. It goes on from there. You can read it all over at alliedprogress.org. And, of course, Donald Trump running this giant scam to move his dad's money into his pockets without paying gift taxes on it. It's amazing.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So we will pick up your calls in just a minute. It's 18 minutes past the hour, and Trump is apparently texting us all right now. And welcome back. And thanks so much for being with us. Vicki in Woodinvale, Washington. Hey, Vicki, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. Well, I'm thinking that...
I'm getting my alert from the president. This is a test of the national wire. Can you hear that?
Yes, I can.
It's coming through on my watch. Okay.
Well...
That's amazing.
Be comforted, because he's all about national interest. Although the powers that be in Congress and the lobbyists are very much bent on getting the multinational corporations taken care of, so that there is no national policy as far as concerns for trade or our local country. But there you go.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that has confounded me forever as a woman is the fact that I first was married for 10 years before putting myself through college and becoming a nurse and being active in the nursing union for 30 years. I have always been trying to get fellow nurses to be activists, and it's always been very difficult. And I thought, well, maybe the reason, because I was single after being divorced, I didn't have children after being divorced, and I didn't have that partnership to try to navigate it with a husband to go along to get along, and I didn't have the need to absolutely devote myself to raising children and while trying to earn a living also, that I had the privilege of having time to become the person that educated myself, became informed and involved in my life within the community, within the country. When I was in high school, I was a child of the '60s, so we were liberals. We were all of my women friends were liberals, with the Kennedys and the Martin Luther King and all of that. And then I wonder what happened. As I grew older, they all became settled in their family unit, and not interested in any discussion that I would have about what I learned on Democracy Now! Or Thom Hartmann, books I read, or like a previous caller talked about what she just learned last night on Frontline.
Right.
These women just stopped.
Do you think what happened was that they got wealthy and comfortable?
Yes, and they didn't have to struggle. I mean, being single, I didn't have enough money. You know, you need two incomes to get anywhere in your life. I just did a reverse mortgage on the house I was lucky enough to buy. And so when you get money you're involved in earning money and involved in raising your kids, then you don't have any identification with people other than your social circle.
Yeah.
Because I'm a nurse that's very diverse in having multicultural co-workers and listening to, like I say, programs like yourselves.
Yeah, I get it. Vicki, I'm sorry, we're hitting the break. We're out of time, but your point is very, very well made. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for sharing your experience and perspective with us. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 23 minutes past the hour. Free Speech TV is supported by your contributions, and I strongly encourage you during the pledge drives, or even not during the pledge drives, to call Free Speech TV at 877-378-8669 and make a contribution, support Free Speech TV. But that said, our program, the Thom Hartmann Program, what you're watching right now, is sustained by commercial advertising, and we're on commercial stations around the country. We run ads. They pay us for that. And one of the ways that you can support our program is by going to thomhartmann.com, our website, and clicking on the advertisements on that page for our sponsors and buying their products, supporting their products, or letting them know that you care about their products and that you support our show. That's thomhartmann.com, and click on the advertising there to support our program. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your supporting Free Speech TV by your ongoing, calling and supporting the fundraising drives, and we also would really appreciate if you go to thomhartmann.com.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And John in San Francisco, listening on AM 910. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I wanted to address what Amber said from, I'm not sure what part of the country she's from, but...
and if I may interrupt you just real quickly for people who just have tuned in the last half hour or so. Amber was a conservative woman who called at the end of the last hour and was trying to explain to me what it meant to be a conservative woman and why she was distrustful of Christine Blasey Ford and why she was supportive of Donald Trump. Back to you, John.
Okay. I was a exchange student. My mother was born in Nazi-occupied Denmark in the 1930s, and her family were resistance fighters. And she moved to the United States after the war and raised us in Ronald Reagan-occupied California. And she arranged with her sister to have me go to school in Denmark when I was a teenager, and so I studied there, and it was a wonderful experience. It was the best years of my life there. Anyway, one thing that Amber can do, and she doesn't have to leave the comfort of her own neighborhood, is to have an exchange student come to her place, and they're really, the Scandinavians are really good at it, the Germans are good at it, and there's a fire engine going by, sorry. And they have a wonderful system of education that if you don't want to you go to school from 7 to 15 or 16, mandatory, and it's 10 months a year, and the kids come out smarter than we do by about at least 25% smarter, right, is my ballpark estimate. But they have a choice. They can go to technical schools. You can do all kinds of technical stuff, or you can go to what I did was the community college level. Yeah. Or if you're really bright, you can go straight into university.
Right. So you're responding to Amber's argument that she thought that if we had free college for everybody, this liberal stuff, that you'd have all kinds of people going to college and wasting their time, was her phrase.
Right, and San Francisco's had free community college here for 2 years now, and it's going well. It's had some fits and starts, but it's moving along, and people who need access to free community college are getting it. And the state of California, when I was going through school, offered very inexpensive state university and University of California educations that are, have been really, really jacked up since I was in school.
No, John, I'm sorry we're out of time, but it's a great response. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for listening to AM 910 in San Francisco. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Trends Squared by Mark Penn. The first chapter, The Building Blocks of Change Today, The Power of Microtrends. We live in a microtrends world. It's driven by granular, often opposite patterns of human behavior that seem small but punch above their size. We've identified these powerful patterns as microtrends, and the world is full of them. Together, they are the dots of a global impressionist painting that comes to life when you step back and look at it holistically. These forces have only become more impactful in recent years, and they've started to upend society. 10 years ago, when I first identified these patterns in change and microtrends, I saw a world of boundless opportunities. I was over-the-top optimistic about how microtrends would produce a new world of personalized products on our shelf, and how in Washington they would produce an even greater selection of fresh, first-rate political choices. Of course, that's not exactly what happened. Instead, the information age has given way to the disinformation age, in which fake information abounds. The nation founded on free speech is grappling with how to live with free speech in the era of the internet troll. The optimism around our economy faded with the unexpected crash of 2008, followed by a historically slow recovery over a decade. Only now is it recovering. Unparalleled consumer choice is leading not to the growth of more startups, but to the dominance of just a few internet companies, which are amassing more and more power on the basis of data gleaned from willing but unknowing consumers. And the older generations, who in their own youth led a rebellion, have now dug in their heels against the politics and culture of today's new generations. What makes the microtrend such a powerful tool in this moment is that it can unpack and explain changes that we're seeing that otherwise make no sense. On the surface, for example, the middle class can seem to be shrinking, and this is alarming. But it is only by digging deeper and seeing that education is driving more people into the upper classes that we can come to understand these overall statistics at a more molecular level. Often, two diametrically opposed trends are occurring at the same time, which would be invisible in the averages, but which leap out when understood as the result of a cauldron of microtrends. Today in politics, for example, there is no overall ideological shift. Instead, one group of moderates became more conservative and another group became more liberal, causing society to become both more liberal and more conservative at the same time, essentially canceling each other out. This increased polarization then produces even more gridlock and confusion. We can see similar tugs and pulls throughout society. While one group seeks more technology, another one wants to sit in the Amtrak quiet car. Some can't sit through a 6-second commercial. Others spend hours and hours binge-watching TV. Some live in a world of globalization, while others yearn for a return to greater nationalism. To explain all this, we've borrowed from Newtonian physics. For every trend, there is a counter-trend. It's human nature in the information age. Every move or desire in one direction seems to inspire a counter-move by another group in the opposite direction. For every radical group, there's a new conservative group. For every new product in mobile technology, there are those sticking to the flip phone. Only by understanding the complexity of these developments can we make sense of a world that seems senseless, confused, and even jumbled. While in 2007, microtrends allowed you to navigate the changes of the day, now Microtrends Squared lets you better understand the emerging chaos as the seesawing of opposite forces fighting for dominance in the social, political, and cultural worlds. In the last decade, technology was able to exploit and even conquer the world of microtrends with its ability to customize products and our lives based on AI and big data. But even as these attempts have transformed our lifestyles, they've also led to some serious unintended consequences that have further clouded society. Microtrends disentangles many of these shifts and lies at the source of many battles for power that have disrupted our world today. As you'll see throughout this book, those ongoing battles will result in some very unlikely winners, losers, and shifts in the overall power match of society. While the technology behind increased personalization of goods and services has been providing us with more choice in our daily life, we've instead been making fewer choices, burrowing into comfortable silos. We expected that the advances in our ability to customize goods and services would open us all up to a new world of never-ending experimentation. A decade later, exactly the opposite has occurred, and our society has become increasingly polarized, with people finding choices they like and picking them over and over again. In 2007, microtrends explained how the Starbucks economy had succeeded the Ford economy. In the Ford economy, you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black. The aim of industry was to mass produce products at the lowest possible cost, and that meant standardization of goods. But the new economy of the 21st century was moving starkly away from that model, instead providing consumers with any color they wanted. The Starbucks economy was based on creating greater value through customization, even of simple products like coffee and tea. People everywhere became more individualistic in their tastes and were rebelling from carefully mowed lawns and white picket fences. The marketplace responded to these trends by allowing people to have it their own way, and they did. The theory was that more choice would result in a happier and more satisfied group of consumers. Variety would open consumers up to new experiences, in many ways bringing us closer together, allowing us to mix, match, and try out all sorts of new options. Something rather surprising happened, however, as consumers got more choice. The book Microtrends Squared.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
It's 34 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. I just, every now and then you read one of these posts by somebody in the various websites around, my favorites, Daily Kos, Alternet, Common Dreams, Democratic Underground. This one's over at Democratic Underground. The people standing behind, this is by Lunatica, and it's titled, "The People Standing Behind Trump at His Rallies." And Lunatica writes, "For the first time I realized who they are, and it woke me up and scares me." These are the people standing behind Trump at the rallies. They are the brown shirts, the concentration camp guards, the Gestapo, the good Germans, the anonymous callers who turn their neighbors into the state police, the people who acquired the properties and personal effects of the interned Japanese, the people who took Native American lands for themselves, the hunters of African people to sell them as slaves, and the modern-day ICE agents who are ripping families apart because it's their job. What else can they do? History is replete with these people and what they do. I don't need to list every example. People like Trump are nothing but without these enablers and sycophants. We are insane to try to win these people over or even think we could, and we are the enablers if we don't fight them with everything we have. That is absolutely brilliant. So, that said, let's pick up your phone calls here. Rick in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, listening on KTNF. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Well, hello.
Hey.
One way to get out the vote is to do a stand-up, hands-up moment of silence on a daily basis using the National American Goal Strategy and the Moment of Silence tool, which are explained at the website standupdaily.org with Get Out the Vote as National American Goal number 1, and with Get Big Money Out of Politics as National American Goal number 2. We could go a long way towards reclaiming our democracy from the oligarchy. Professor Paul Gorin, chairman of the Political Science Department at the University of Minnesota, said gerrymandering should be next on the list after getting big money out of politics. Again, that website is standupdaily.org.
Okay, I got it, Rick. Thank you. Let's see here. Cheryl in Northern Kentucky. Hey, Cheryl, what's on your mind?
Yes, this is Carol.
Carol.
Actually, I am originally from Ann Arbor, so I kind of have ties to Lansing too.
Oh, cool.
I'm calling, and your age group. I went through the Vietnam stuff, but I'm calling because I have a question. No one is obviously there has been perjury committed. Either you agree with it or you don't. I agree with it. How is that processed? Is that the Senate, since he lied to them, is that the group that has to pursue it, and is that the reason why he did not speak to the FBI? Because then they could go through the Justice Department, and he could be indicted.
Right.
I don't understand the process.
I don't think that the Senate, outside of impeachment, and that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about actually prosecuting him for perjury. I don't think that outside of impeachment that the Senate has a judiciary function, as it were, the ability to rule that somebody has or has not committed a crime. Instead, what the senators would have to do, because it is a crime to lie under oath before the Senate, what they would have to do is refer to the FBI and the Justice Department. The Justice Department, Jeff Sessions, would have to decide to charge him. The FBI would gather the information, they'd make the case, and it would be, a charge in a federal courthouse. That's obviously not going to happen. Jeff Sessions doesn't care. And frankly, I can't remember any time in my life when anybody who lied to Congress was prosecuted for it, which I think is why Brett Kavanaugh figured he could get away with it in 2002 and 2004 and 2006, and now. He has repeatedly lied to Congress, but he's not the only one. Remember when those tobacco executives stood up and, Senator, I do not believe, I mean, one of them said it, they all said it to Ron Wyden. Senator, I do not believe tobacco is addictive. They lied through their teeth. They knew they were lying, and the Senate never did anything about it. The idea that you must speak the truth to the Senate is by and large a joke. Instead, you must speak the truth to the FBI, and I think that's why Brett Kavanaugh was not interviewed by the FBI. And
that's what I'm thinking, too.
Yeah, and that's as far as it's going to go.
Okay, my next question along that same vein is I have signed petitions in the past that the public has issued. I don't know where they put them. I don't remember how I got them.
Right.
But what is the possibility of immediately trying to get viral a citizen's petition for indictment for the FBI to indict or the Sessions to indict, even if it doesn't happen, it's an expression.
Well, it would be, and the one area where I would caution you is there are a number of groups and websites that do petitions as a business model. Basically, you sign their petition, and then they have your email address, and they have your personal information, your name and address, and they sell that, to people who want to market things to you. So you got to be really careful about whose petition you're signing. And 9 times out of 10, when a politician or a group says, please sign our petition, you click, you sign the petition, and then immediately they ask you for money. So, I'm not sure. And I think you're absolutely right. No matter how many people signed a petition and presented it to the Justice Department, they're probably not going to do anything. The petition we all need to sign is the ballot. We all need to be voting these people out of office. If we had Democrats in control of the House of Representatives, they could do hearings that would reveal the lawlessness that's going on and might be able to shame the Justice Department into doing something. If they took the House and the Senate, then we could do a lot. And so that's what we need to be doing. Thank you very much for the call, Carol. It's great to hear from you. Jim in North Carolina. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I'm a long-time listener.
Thank you.
I'm on the left, and, we always hear, register to vote, get out to vote. We always have rallies and programs to vote. But one thing I never hear is on the right. They never push people to get out to vote. Yet when we do vote, a lot of times the numbers are real close. What's your take on that?
They actually do. There are large, substantial, and broad-based and very, very well-funded. I mean, this is part of the Americans for Prosperity and some of the other front groups. Efforts, get out the vote efforts that are aimed at conservatives and Republicans. You don't know about them because by and large, they're not trying to register new voters. They conservatives and Republicans tend to register to vote as soon as they can and vote consistently throughout their lives. But the get out the vote effort that does exist in that world is pretty much limited to direct response stuff. They're talking directly to their voters. They're calling their voters. They're mailing to their voters, but they're not running ads to try to reach new voters because they don't feel that they need to. But there's an absolute, on the right, they've invested as much money in get out the vote efforts as they have on the left.
Thanks.
So, okay, you're welcome, Jim. Good to hear from you. Let's see here. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I wanted to propose another reason why Kavanaugh and Trump enjoy so much support from Caucasian women. Do you remember Air America?
Yeah, I was on Air America.
Yeah. Well,
I helped start Air America, actually. I wrote the first business plan for Air America.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. But around 2007, 2008, I was at Fort Campbell, and I was on active duty between deployments. And I got a job because I had some family problems. When I was on base, they gave me a job with the EPA, okay? and the Environmental Protection Agency. But I just did simple stuff like check spill kits and monitor equipment that was monitoring spills. But anyways, there was a female there, very educated. She actually worked for the EPA, and I mean, she was the boss of my boss. Okay, well, they canceled Air America, but they kept on Rush Limbaugh. We would listen to it on our computers. All right, and
are you talking about American Forces Network?
Yeah. At Fort Campbell specifically, they blocked Air America, but they left on Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, because they've got their own radio station there. Yeah, okay, got it.
And it made me mad, and I complained. Well, that brought attention to me, and a lot of bad attention. They were like, you're lucky to have this job. You shouldn't be complaining, right?
Right.
And what I did is I said, look, this is like, what's the media for? To give instruction? The old Goebbels quote. Well, this white female at the time, and it's the way she condemned what I said. She said that I, was naive, like I was somehow, very immature in my thoughts and very, of course the media should give instruction during time of war, not information.
Right.
Well, and she was a big George Bush supporter, and that got me interested in the neoconservative philosophy, really. And we all might go through neoconservative times, but long story short, or neoconservative sympathies in our life. We might all go through that. But long story short, I think that after studying neoconservatism and listening to what she said, I think a lot of educated white females, particularly, have bought into this concept that the health and vitality of the corporation is essential to the health and vitality of our society.
Right. And that's been a major meme. I mean, it was in the late 1920s that the Secretary of the Treasury, I believe it was, to Herbert Hoover said, "What's good for General Motors is good for America."
Yeah, and remember George Bush said, what can we do to support the war effort? He said, go shopping.
That's right.
I think people that are sympathetic to that or agree with George Bush, especially women that agree, okay, I will shop, I will support the community, I will support the nation. I think they have neoconservative leanings, and Brett Kavanaugh's a neoconservative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't dispute that at all. And I would say just, even broadly conservative, the idea of, that the subset of conservative, the largest subset is authoritarian. And so they're authoritarian followers as well. Dave, thanks for the call. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back. And welcome back. Gene in New York City. Hey, Gene, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, it's great to talk with you. Thank you for all you do, man. I've been reading this Oxford Dictionary of Quotations, and I keep running as I'm riding on the bus or the subway. Reading these quotes are great, and every page is filled with so many. One of the quotes I think is entirely appropriate. There are two of them that I'd like to talk about. The Edward Everett Hale. He was the son of Nathan Hale, American patriot executed by the British. Yeah. So this Edward Everett Hale. Now he was an author, historian, Unitarian minister. Yeah. He was asked a question. The question was, do you pray for the senators, Dr. Hale? And his response was, no, I look at the senators and I pray for the country. Entirely appropriate for where we are.
Yeah.
There's another one, and this is from President Thomas Jefferson. It was in a long letter to Gideon Granger. And he said, you have to understand what he says common law in here. He's saying a single government, which is pretty much what we have now, and that's what we have with the Republicans taking all three houses. So this is the statement, if the principle were to prevail of a common law being enforced in the United States, it would become the most corrupt government on the earth. And I feel like this is where we are now. I mean, you look at what's happening with Trump and Times report. You know, he's known to be a criminal.
Yeah.
I know people in real estate in New York City here, where I live, they've known about him for years.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise.
Yeah, the guy's a grifter and a con man. That's fascinating. Gene, thanks for sharing those quotes with us. That's great stuff, and I think your points are solid and spot on, and very well said. Ann in Seattle, listening on KBCS. Hey, Ann, what's up?
Hi. Sorry, excuse me. Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I am calling because the first time, I'm sorry, I'm nervous and I lost my notes here. I'm calling because I trust you and your staff for fact checking.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been confounded and wondering for a very long time about the statements made about women and voting in general for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a education and past career in media, so I think I listen to news with a more critical ear than most people. The statement I hear over and over is this statement, I think I heard it earlier today on your show, about how, more than 50%, what's the percentage?
53% of white women voted for Donald Trump in the last election.
Right. And the first time I heard that, I just thought that I was just incredulous.
Right.
Because what I heard was, and what I'm afraid most people hear is, and the way it's used to make a point is, 53% of white women in America voted for Donald Trump.
No, it was 53% of the women who voted in the election, which is 1/5 of the population.
Point, those two words, "who voted,"
right,
is almost always left out of that statement. And then if you do the math, so what's the percentage of people who voted in the last presidential election?
Right. Well, it's about half the eligible electorate are actually registered, and about half of them actually vote. So that's a quarter. And then if you added kids to make the entire population, it's probably a fifth. But it's a small number, and then it would be half of that. Ann, I got to run. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Richard in Palm Springs, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Richard.
I have a comment on Kavanaugh, but first, real brief, I want to compliment you on your book that, for the first time ever, I believe, revealed the way corporate personhood was adopted.
It wasn't the first time ever, but it was. I think it was the first book that's gone big and popular that talked about this. Yeah, I credit Jay. I'm forgetting his last name now. The guy who first came up with the theory back in the 1950s. I mentioned him in the book. But anyhow, back to you.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, real brief on that point. I have had an idea for quite a while that one of the keys to reforming our society, our culture, our politics, and everything is legally repealing corporate personhood. Probably, unfortunately, totally unrealistic.
Well, it requires a constitutional amendment, and there's an entire organization, Move to Amend, dedicated to just that issue, and they're doing great work, movetoamend.org. And Public Citizen is working on this really hard, too, at citizen.org.
What's the first website again, name?
Movetoamend.org.
Oh, I got it.
As in amend the Constitution to say that corporations aren't people and money is not speech.
I'm going to look that up, thank you. Okay, on Kavanaugh, I have something I've been thinking about for a week or two, and I haven't heard anyone else discuss it, and I think it's important that once the Senate fiasco is over, however it goes, well, let's say he's not approved for the Supreme Court, I think we should push to begin proceedings to impeach and remove him from his current judgeship.
Oh, yeah, he's clearly not fit to be a judge. And prior to his current judgeship, he never worked as a lawyer. He has never tried a case. Obviously, as a judge, he has tried cases, but as a lawyer, he has never argued a case. He has never been on the side of the defense. He's never been on the side of the prosecution. He got out of law school. He started working for Republicans. He worked for Ken Starr. He worked for George W. Bush for 3 years. He worked for Ken Starr back in the 90s. He was a Republican hitman. He was one of the lawyers who worked on George W. Bush's lawsuit, Bush v. Gore, that put him into the White House, that went to the Supreme Court. He clerked for Justice Kennedy. So, you know, and before that, he clerked for that really skeezy judge who got busted for sharing porn with the women who worked for him and stuff like that. What was his name? Say it loud. Kaczynski, yeah, Judge Kaczynski. Thank you, Sean. But that's it. I mean, you know, basically he was a Republican operative with a law degree, and then boom, he's on, you know, the number 2 court in the entire United States, and they want to move him to the number 1 court. I agree. He should be impeached from the D.C. Circuit.
And it took 3 years, I'm reading, for him to get through on.
Because they knew that he was lying to them the first time that he testified before Congress. I think it was 2 years, but yeah, they knew that he was lying to them, and they had evidence that he was lying to them, and because of that, they said, okay, we're not going to do this. So I'm totally with you, Richard. I want to get some more calls in, but thank you for the call. That's a good one. Don in Berkeley, California. Hey, Don, what's up?
Hi there. Really fast. When I've yet to present this to the women, but whenever they talk about voting for Trump because of the abortion issue, you got to consider the first thing he did was when he got into office, was to allow coal companies to dump their waste into rivers, thus flowing down the river. How many abortions has that caused? Along
That's a great point.
Destroying the EPA, the consumer protections, telling how many people that has not only killed their babies, is deformed. It's just horrible what the policies that he's done. Yeah, they may be doing away with abortions, legal abortions, but all of this dumping of waste and such is just creating more abortions or
miscarriages. Yeah, absolutely. Don, excellent point. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Gary in Chicago. Hey, Gary, what's up?
Tom, my point with modern Christianity has, through the evangelical movement, has descended into cults of Calvinism. And that is why you're seeing this coming together between fortune and faith, and now politics towards the theocracy. Okay, the televangelists live large for a reason. The whole mantra there is, if you're right with the Lord is right with you.
Right.
So the more money you put on the plate, is going to come back to you.
Well, and that's absolutely the sales pitch. Yeah, excellent point, Gary.
And anyone who is raped, it's because they weren't right with the Lord.
Oh, geez. Yeah. It doesn't surprise me. Gary, thank you for the call. Greg in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Greg. Last minute.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
I have a question for you, and I guess it depends, of course, on.
It's going to be at the quick. We've got 30 seconds.
Okay. If high crimes and misdemeanors, when they were written, referred to lies, among other things, in the military, and if you lie consistently and incoherently in the military, you are ultimately prosecuted.
Right.
Why is a commander-in-chief who lies routinely every day, it's not even a secret, even the Republicans know that, why is he exempt somehow from lies being a high crime and misdemeanor?
Because he's not covered by the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He is covered by, constitutional law, and there is no law against politicians lying, as we've all kind of figured out. And Donald Trump is a politician. It would be great if there. Well, I'm not sure if it would be great if there were or not, but and I think that there is a fairly high level of accountability to which Trump is being held by the media. I mean, the Washington Post documenting his thousands of lies, his dozens of lies every single day, Sarah Huckabee Sanders' lies, the lies of his cabinet officials. It's pretty breathtaking, and it's all there. I mean, it's not hidden. So I'm not sure that we need laws around this. We just need better reporting. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat place. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it.
See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN headquarters.